When I was 19, I left my hometown and moved to a new city with a guy I was dating. We didn't live together, though we each had our own place. My dad, a veteran who came back from Afghanistan with PTSD, had always been strict about safety. He drilled into me the habit of locking my doors at all hours, day or night. To make sure I felt secure living alone in the city, he gave me a shotgun for protection. I kept it close, though I never imagined I'd need it. At first, everything was fine, but then I started noticing things. Small noises in my apartment, creaks, taps, the kind of sounds you'd expect in an old building. I brushed them off as paranoia, just my nerves getting the better of me, because I was living on my own for the first time. But one night, something changed. I was in bed, my boyfriend staying over. He was a big guy, a football player with a black belt, so I felt safe with him there. Still, I woke up with this unshakable feeling that someone was in the apartment. It wasn't a sound or anything I could pinpoint. It was just a heavy, certain sense of another presence. I nudged my boyfriend awake, my heart racing, and asked him to check the place. He got up, unafraid, and searched every corner, closets, rooms, under the bed. He even double-checked the locks on the doors and windows. Nothing. No one was there. I tried to laugh it off, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at me. Time passed, and things didn't get better. One evening, my boyfriend and I came back to my apartment after being out all day. Like always, I checked the lock before putting my key in. It was secure, just as I'd left it. But the second I stepped inside, that same gut-wrenching feeling hit me again. Someone was there. I could feel their presence, like a weight in the air. I froze, my skin prickling, and whispered to my boyfriend to check again. He sighed but humored me, going through the same routine, closets, rooms, locks. Again, nothing. He tried to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the sensation. It was like the apartment itself was watching me. Eventually, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I started dating someone new. Around that time, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and things spiraled. I hit a crisis point, mood swinging wildly, thoughts racing. One night, my ex showed up at my place with some friends, and he caused a scene, yelling about my new boyfriend. I was furious and humiliated, so I kicked everyone out. Alone, I turned to the bottle, drinking heavily until I blacked out. When I came to, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, muttering awful things to myself, tearing myself down. But then I noticed something in the reflection, figures standing behind me, watching. They were shadowy, indistinct, but undeniably there. My heart stopped. I spun around, but the room was empty. The figures were only in the mirror. After that, seeing these figures became almost routine. It only happened when I was alone, usually in my bedroom. I'd catch them in the doorway, their shapes dark and featureless, just standing there. Sometimes I'd see them in the mirror's reflection, but not in the actual doorway. They were always silent, always watching. I tried to tell myself it was my mind playing tricks, a side effect of my diagnosis or the meds, but it felt too real. Last spring, I went to a small mining village in Virginia with my family to bury my grandmother at our family cemetery. One night in the hotel, I woke everyone up with my screaming. In my dream, I was back in my childhood home, and a shadow figure, like the Slender Man but worse, stood before me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and a deafening blast of TV static poured out, so loud it felt like my head would split. I was shaken for months, my anxiety spiking every time I thought about it. For a long time, the figures only appeared when I was alone, either in my room or sometimes when I was driving at night. My doctor dismissed the driving ones, saying it's common for people to see shapes in the dark while driving, but that didn't ease my fear. I started sleeping with the lights on, hoping it would keep them away. But then they started showing up even when I wasn't alone. I'd see them when I visited my mom or when my current boyfriend was spending the night. I'd point them out to him, my voice trembling, but he never saw anything. He'd hold me, trying to calm me down, but I could tell he was starting to worry. This fall, things got worse. I started experiencing sleep paralysis. The first time, I thought I heard my boyfriend moving around at the foot of the bed. I tried to look, but my body was frozen, locked in place. Then I saw it, a shadow figure, faceless and menacing, walking toward me. It leaned down and placed its hand over my eyes, cold and heavy. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My chest felt like it was caving in. The second time was even worse. I woke up to hands gripping my shoulders, one of them sliding up to my throat, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. I fought to make any noise, blowing out air in desperate bursts until my boyfriend woke up. He grabbed my hand, shaking me awake, but the grip on my throat tightened. Like the figure was angry, I was slipping away. When I finally snapped out of it, I was sobbing, clinging to him. These figures are almost always men, their faces blank, no eyes or mouths, just smooth darkness. Sometimes there's just one, other times there are many, crowding the doorway or surrounding me. They feel menacing, like they want to hurt me. Once, I woke up to the sensation of a woman's presence, her anger crashing over me like a wave. She threw herself onto me, her weight pinning me to the bed. I dove under the covers, heart pounding, praying she'd go away. Some nights, the figures feel so real I leap out of bed screaming, my voice raw with terror. Other times, they're faint enough that I can ignore them, pretending they're just shadows in my mind. I have nightmares about them chasing me through my apartment, their long dark forms closing in. Recently, my mom told me something that chilled me to the bone. My dad, who's struggled with his own demons since Afghanistan, had a nightmare about shadow people chasing him. It shook him badly, worse than I'd ever heard. The meds my doctors prescribe don't stop the figures. They don't know why I keep seeing them, and I'm starting to lose hope they ever will. Lately, the figures have started doing something new, waving at me from my doorway, their movements slow and deliberate, like they're taunting me. It's unsettling, like they're getting bolder, more real. I'm a 26-year-old guy living in Richmond, Virginia. I never thought I'd be dealing with something like this. It's not the life I imagined, but here I am, caught in this nightmare I can't escape. The shotgun my dad gave me still sits in my closet, but it's useless against these things. They're not flesh and blood. There's something else, something I don't understand. And every night, I wonder if they'll come back, waving, watching, waiting. I'm a 26-year-old guy living in Richmond, Virginia, and I never thought I'd end up in a situation as unsettling as this one. It all went down one night when my friends and I decided to hang out at a small brewery in a nice part of town. The place was cozy, with a warm buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. We were sipping beers, laughing, and playing Cards Against Humanity, just having a good time. Nothing crazy, just a typical night out. I got up to grab another beer from the bar, weaving through the crowd, when one of my friends playfully bumped my shoulder as he passed by. I grinned and gave him a light nudge back, thinking nothing of it. That's when things took a weird turn. Out of nowhere, this guy approached me. He was in his late 30s, tall, average build, but his eyes, they were dead, like there was nothing behind them. I later nicknamed him King Jellybean in my head because there was something off about him, like character from a twisted cartoon. He zeroed in on me and asked, "Why do you just do that?" His tone was sharp, almost accusatory. I blinked, caught off guard, and said, "Oh, that? He's just my friend, messing around." I forced a smile, hoping to defuse whatever this was. But he didn't let it go. "You gonna do anything about it?" he pressed, his voice low and serious. I could tell he wasn't joking, but I tried to keep things light. "Don't worry," I said, chuckling. "I'll kill him later." It was a dumb, sarcastic remark, meant to brush him off. To my surprise, he nodded like he approved. "I can respect that," he said, his face still blank. Then he stuck out his hand for a handshake. Something about him screamed trouble, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I shook his hand. Holy crap, his grip was like a vice, scary strong, and he held on way too long, his cold eyes locked on mine. My stomach twisted, but I managed to wriggle my hand free, forcing another smile. Trying to stay calm, I figured I should at least get his name, just in case things got weirder. "So, friend, what's your name?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. He mumbled something incoherent, his words slurring into a low, unintelligible mess. I leaned in a bit and tried again. "Sorry, what was that?" "Nothing. Just more mumbling." I gave up, nodded politely, and hightailed it back to my table, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. When I sat down, I glanced over my shoulder and caught him still watching me from across the room, his dead eyes fixed on me like a predator tracking prey. My heart raced, but I tried to shake it off as paranoia. I told my friends about the encounter, hoping they'd have my back, but they just laughed it off. "Dude, he's probably just drunk," one of them said, waving it away. I wanted to believe them, so I let it go, telling myself I was overreacting. After all, it was a crowded brewery in a nice neighborhood. What could happen? A little while later, we took a break from the game, and a couple of us needed to hit the bathroom. My friend and I headed toward the back, passing the bar. Sure enough, there was King Jelly Bean, stepping right into my path like he'd been waiting for me. "Shake my hand," he said, his voice flat but insistent, holding out his hand again. My gut screamed at me to walk away, but I didn't want to escalate things, so like an idiot, I shook his hand. That iron grip clamped down again, squeezing until it hurt. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension, saying something about the beer selection, but he just mumbled nonsense, his eyes boring into me. I could feel my pulse in my throat. "All right, man, you're hurting my hand now," I said, trying to sound firm but not aggressive. "I gotta pee, so I'm gonna go." I yanked my hand free and started toward the bathroom, but my friend, who just finished up, overheard me and gave me a look. I didn't want to be alone with this guy nearby, so instead of going to the bathroom, I just turned and headed back to our table, my skin crawling. By now, my friends were starting to pick up on how creepy this guy was. They'd seen the second handshake, and the vibe at the table shifted. Everyone was a little on edge, glancing around the room. About 10 minutes passed, and I really had to pee. I've been holding it since the bar. I told my friends, and one of them, trying to lighten the mood, joked, "Watch out, he might be waiting in the bathroom for you." It was meant to be funny, but it hit me like a lightning bolt. We all looked around the room, and King Jelly Bean was gone. We were sitting near the exit, and we hadn't seen him leave. My stomach dropped. "Where the hell is he?" I muttered, scanning the crowd. The thought of him lurking somewhere, waiting, made my blood run cold. I wasn't about to go to the bathroom alone, so I asked one of my friends to come with me. We headed to the closer bathroom, the one near the back. The door was slightly ajar, and the light was off, leaving just a sliver of darkness visible through the crack. I nudged the door open a few inches, peering inside. It was pitch black, with only the vague outlines of the sink and stalls. Something felt wrong, like the air was too still. I turned to my friend and whispered, "Dude, I don't know, it just feels off." He started to say something, but I didn't hear it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the door swing open, and there he was, King Jelly Bean, standing alone in the dark doorway, staring at me with the creepiest smile I've ever seen. His teeth gleamed in the dim light, and his eyes were like black holes, empty and unblinking. My heart stopped. "Oh, hell no," I yelled, my voice cracking with panic. I turned and bolted back to the table, shouting, "Nope, nope, nope," as I ran, my friend right behind me. My friends at the table saw my face and knew something was seriously wrong. According to them, they'd been watching the whole thing from across the room, and it was clear this guy had been standing in the dark bathroom, alone, for over 10 minutes, just waiting for me to walk in. The thought made my skin crawl. I wish I could say we confronted him or called the cops, but I was too freaked out. My mind was screaming at me to get out of there. We grabbed our coats, threw some cash on the table, and got the hell out of the brewery as fast as we could. As we spilled out onto the street, my heart was still pounding. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him following us, that creepy smile plastered on his face. We didn't stick around to find out what he wanted or what might have happened if I'd gone into that bathroom alone. The whole thing left me shaken, wondering who this guy was and why he'd singled me out. I'm just glad I didn't have to find out what he was capable of, and I hope no one else does either. I'm a nurse working on a hospital wing, and while I've seen my share of strange things, nothing compares to what happened one night with a patient who passed away unexpectedly. She was a terminal cancer patient, but her condition wasn't critical enough for us to expect her death that night. She'd been fighting a long battle, and everything was arranged for her transfer to a new facility the next morning. Her husband had plans to meet her there, and all the paperwork was in order. When I checked on her earlier, she was in good spirits, sitting up in bed, chatting lightly. Her vitals were stable, and her assessment showed no red flags. She took her medications as usual, told me she was going to watch the news, and then take a nap. I smiled, adjusted her pillow, and left her to rest, feeling confident she was comfortable. About an hour later, I went back to check on her. The room was quiet, the soft glow of the TV casting shadows on the walls. I moved carefully, not wanting to disturb her if she was sleeping. I checked her 4-line, made sure her water pitcher and call button were within reach, and adjusted her bedside table. Then I noticed something off. She was sitting up, her hand resting on the side rail, her head slightly tilted as if she dozed off. But she was too still. My heart sank as I leaned closer, checking for any sign of breathing. There was none. No heartbeat, no rise and fall of her chest. Unlike most patients who pass, her mouth wasn't open, and she didn't have that vacant look. She looked peaceful, almost like she was just napping. I stood there frozen, hoping I was wrong, that she'd stir any second. I called a coworker to confirm, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd found. She checked and nodded solemnly. Our patient was gone. I tried to stay professional, but it hit me hard. I attempted to contact her husband, but he didn't answer, so I left a message and started the paperwork, all while tending to my other patients. The ward was busy, and I had to keep moving, but the weight of her passing lingered in my chest. A few minutes later, I was at the central desk, updating charts, when another nurse asked, "Where were you just now?" I told her I'd been down the hall, administering meds. I noticed 2 other nurses exchange a quick glance, their faces unreadable. Nurses can be weird sometimes, so I didn't think much of it and went back to my duties, focusing on patient education at the far end of the ward. Then the charge nurse came to find me. I assumed it was about the husband calling back, but her expression told me it was something else. She pulled me aside and explained what had been happening while I was busy. Apparently, there had been several phone calls coming from the deceased patient's room to the central station. No one spoke on the other end, just heavy, uneven breathing, like someone was holding the receiver but saying nothing. My stomach twisted. "It's gotta be a prank, right?" I said, trying to laugh it off, but my voice wavered. The charge nurse didn't smile. She led me to the desk, and as we stood there, the phone rang again. I glanced at the caller ID, and my blood ran cold. It was her room number. I hesitated, then picked up the receiver. Nothing but that same eerie breathing, slow and deliberate. I hung up quickly, my hands trembling. I gathered my courage and went to check the room. The door was closed, just as we'd left it. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. The patient was still there, unchanged, her body still in that serene, seated position, looking like she was just asleep. The phone was neatly placed on the bedside table, exactly where it belonged. The TV was off now, its screen dark. I checked the bathroom, half expecting to find someone hiding, but it was empty. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to seem rattled in front of the others. "I'm leaving the door halfway open," I said to no one in particular, my voice louder than I meant it to be as I stepped back into the hall. After that, the phone calls stopped, but the night only got stranger. For the next hour, alarms went off in empty rooms down the hall, their shrill beeps echoing through the ward. Call lights flickered on for patients who couldn't move, their buttons untouched. A critical piece of equipment, a monitor we relied on, suddenly died, its screen going black for no reason. One of our dementia patients, a sweet elderly woman, kept complaining about the other patient who was wandering into her room. She described someone who loosely matched our deceased patient, same build, same quiet demeanor. I tried to reassure her, but her words sent a chill down my spine. I kept telling myself it was just a coincidence, that hospitals are full of glitches and confused patients, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. Finally, the husband arrived. I'd been dreading this moment, knowing I'd have to break the news. He looked tired, his face heavy with grief, like he already knew why I'd called. He spent a few minutes in the room with her, sitting by her side, holding her hand. When he came out, he found me at the desk. His eyes were red, but he managed a small, sad smile. "She told me this morning she never wanted to go to a nursing home," he said softly. Well, I guess she meant it. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, my throat tight. After he left, the wards settled down. The alarm stopped, the call lights stayed off, and the dementia patient slept soundly. Everything returned to normal, or as normal as a hospital ever gets. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had lingered in that room, something that didn't want to let go until her husband came to say goodbye. I've worked plenty of night shifts since then, but that night stays with me, a quiet, unsettling reminder of how thin the line between life and death can feel in a place like this. I'm a young woman, barely strong enough to walk my massive dog, living alone for the first time in a cozy apartment attached to a row of townhouses in a not-so-great part of town. It's a unique setup, like a tiny house sharing a wall with a main building, separated from the other structures by a narrow strip of woods. Despite the rough neighborhood, I love it here. The rent is cheap, I've got my own backyard, working electricity, and a private space that feels like mine. My giant dog, a hulking beast who's all bark and no bite, makes me feel secure. Or at least he did until last night, when something happened that scared the absolute hell out of me. I was lying in bed, scrolling through Reddit on my phone, trying to wind down and fall asleep. It was close to midnight, and the apartment was quiet except for the occasional hum of the fridge. Then I heard it, a faint tapping on my bedroom window. My room has 2 ground-level windows facing the backyard, about 10 feet from the tree line, with nothing but open grass between the house and the woods. At first, I thought it was just a branch brushing against the glass, a common enough sound since I'm not used to sleeping on the first floor. But then I remember there are no trees close enough to touch the house. My stomach tightened, a mix of fear and irritation bubbling up. I was some weird combination of scared and annoyed that this noise was keeping me awake. The tapping continued, uneven and persistent, not like the rhythmic patter of rain or wind. My dog perked up, his ears twitching, but he didn't bark, which calmed me a bit. If it was a person, he'd be losing his mind, right? Still, the sound was getting under my skin. It had been going on for nearly 30 minutes, and I had an early class the next morning. Annoyance started to overtake fear, and I decided I'd had enough. I figured I'd yell at whatever was making the noise. Best case, it was just the wind, and I'd look like an idiot shouting into the dark. Worst case, someone was out there, and my bold reaction might catch them off guard and scare them off. I wasn't about to let some creep think I was an easy target. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and called out, "Knock it off," into the darkness, my voice sharp but shaky. The tapping didn't stop. A few seconds later, I tried again, louder this time, my frustration boiling over. "Knock it off, I'm trying to sleep." To my shock, the tapping stopped abruptly. But then a man's voice called back, calm and casual. "Sorry." My blood froze. I hadn't expected an actual person to be out there. My heart started pounding, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. I scrambled out of bed, clutching my phone, ready to dial 911 if I had to. I crept to the window, my dog now alert but still not barking, and peeked through the blinds, careful not to move them too much. There he was, a guy standing in my backyard, his hands raised like he was surrendering, and the creepiest smile I'd ever seen plastered across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was wide, unnatural, like something out of a horror movie. My breath caught in my throat. I fumbled with my phone, turning on the flashlight and shining it toward my face so he couldn't see what I looked like. I stood there frozen, staring at him through the narrow gap in the blinds. A few seconds later, I flicked on the bedroom light, hoping it would spook him. He didn't move an inch, not even his expression. That same eerie smile stayed fixed, his eyes locked on the window like he could see right through me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he lowered his hands, turned, and started walking back toward the woods, disappearing into the shadows. I assumed he was heading to one of the apartments across the strip of trees, maybe a neighbor I hadn't met. But who the hell taps on a stranger's window for half an hour at midnight? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he trying to scare me? Break in? Or was it something even more twisted? I stood by the window for a long time, my phone still in my hand, too shaken to move. My dog, sensing my anxiety, pressed against my leg, but even his warmth couldn't calm me down. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every creak in the apartment made me jump, and I kept checking the locks, half expecting to see that creepy smile peering through the glass again. When morning finally came, I dragged myself out of bed, exhausted and on edge. As I pulled back the curtains to let in some light, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The outside of the window pane had several deep scratches, jagged and deliberate, etched into the frame. I couldn't be sure if the guy had made them, but the thought that he might have been out there with a knife or some tool sent a shiver down my spine. I decided right then to report it to the property management, and maybe even the police the next day. I didn't want to think about what he might have wanted if he'd gotten into my bedroom. Part of me hoped he was just a thief, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. I'm nervous about going to bed tonight. I've got class in the morning, and I know I need to rest, but the memory of that smile keeps flashing in my mind. My dog is my saving grace. He's big and scary enough to deter most people, and I'm counting on him to keep me safe. But still, what kind of person does something like that? I haven't seen the guy since, and I'm praying he doesn't come back. If he does, I'm not sure what I'll do. For now, I'm keeping the blinds shut tight and the lights on, hoping that's enough to keep whatever he was away. My house is an old 3-story beast, complete with a basement and an attic that's more trouble than it's worth. My childhood bedroom, unfortunately, was right below the attic door, a creaky wooden hatch that always felt like it was hiding something. That room was a nightmare to sleep in. In the winter, it was so cold I could see my breath, and in the summer, it turned into an oven easily hitting 100 degrees. None of the other rooms in the house had this problem, and I always chalked it up to bad insulation or faulty heating. But looking back, I'm not so sure it was just the house settling. About 3 years ago, I started hallucinating at night, or at least that's what I thought they were. I'd wake up in a panic, convinced my blanket had turned into a giant snake, slithering off the bed. Other times, I'd see ants crawling all over the walls, only for them to vanish the second I flicked on the light. It was unsettling, but I trained myself not to take anything I saw in the dark seriously. My overactive imagination, I told myself, was just playing tricks. These hallucinations started when we first moved into the house. Back then, I slept in a different room, but sleep was still a struggle. Every night, at the exact same time, when the house was dead quiet and everyone else was asleep, I'd hear something. 4 distinct knocks on the roof, like someone was tapping with a hammer. Always 4, never more, never less. It wasn't loud enough to wake anyone else, but it was enough to keep me staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. This went on for about a week before it stopped, and I never told anyone. Who'd believe me? I wasn't even sure it was real. Other small things happened too, especially when I was upstairs alone. My bedroom door would swing open or shut on its own, the hinges groaning softly. I'd blame the wind, even though the windows were usually closed. But what really got to me was my dog. He's a loyal mutt who spends most of his time in my room, curled up at the foot of my bed. Every time the door moved, he'd perk up, his ears twitching, and let out a low growl. After the 3rd time, I couldn't pretend it was a coincidence anymore. His reaction made it feel too real, like he was sensing something I couldn't. From then on, I avoided going upstairs alone whenever possible. The whole upper floor started to feel wrong, like the air was heavier up there. Then things got worse. One day, I was home alone, and it wasn't even night, just broad daylight, the sun streaming through the windows. I was downstairs in the living room, sprawled on the couch, watching TV with my dog snoozing next to me. Out of nowhere, I heard a scraping sound from upstairs, like something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Then came a clicking, like dog nails tapping on hardwood. My pulse quickened. My dog was right here with me, so what the hell was making that noise? I tried to ignore it, turning up the TV volume, but the sounds didn't stop. They grew more distinct. Doors opening and closing, lights flicking on and off, the soft thuds of movement. It was like someone or something was pacing up there, rummaging through the rooms. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the remote, telling myself it was just the house creaking or maybe a squirrel in the attic. But my dog wasn't buying it. He lifted his head, his eyes locked on the ceiling, and then he did something that sent a chill down my spine. He got up, trotted to the stairs, and started climbing, his tail low, but his steps deliberate, like he was going to confront whatever was up there. That's when I knew this wasn't in my head. My dog wasn't afraid of much, and the fact that he was drawn to the noise, like he recognized it, scared the absolute hell out of me. I turned the TV even louder, trying to drown out the sounds, but they kept going, scraping, clicking, thudding. I couldn't bring myself to follow him upstairs. I just sat there, my heart pounding, pretending it wasn't happening. Eventually, the noises stopped, and my dog came back down, looking unbothered. But I put off going upstairs for as long as I could. That night, I had to go to bed, and the darkness made everything worse. I lay in my room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then I noticed something, a black square in the corner of my vision. The attic door, that creaky hatch above my room, was halfway open. My stomach dropped. No one had been up there in years. We didn't even store anything in the attic, just insulation and cobwebs. I bolted out of bed, grabbed my phone, and ran downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I ended up sleeping on the couch, the living room light blazing, too freaked out to go back to my room. The next day, I asked my family if anyone had gone into the attic. Of course, no one had. I didn't push it, part of me didn't want to know. I still don't know what's in this house, but I couldn't stay in that room anymore. I traded bedrooms with my brother, letting him deal with the attic door and the freezing winters. One of the rare times I went back up there was to use his Wi-Fi router, which was in his room. I was sitting on his bed, waiting for him to finish in the bathroom, when I heard it loud, raspy breathing coming from under the bed. I was wide awake, the afternoon sun pouring through the window, so I knew it wasn't a hallucination. My skin crawled, and I got the hell out of there, not even bothering to grab my phone from the bed. That room, that house, it's got something wrong with it, and I don't think I'll ever feel safe upstairs again. I'm a 24-year-old guy living in a large, open apartment complex in a friendly neighborhood where people are always outside, waving to each other, having barbecues, or sharing drinks. It's the kind of place where everyone looks out for one another, and if anything happens, word spreads fast. My apartment is on one of the higher floors, close to the roof, with a door and a short staircase leading up to it right near my place. I'd only been up there once before, just to check out the view, and it seemed harmless enough, a flat, open space where people sometimes hung out. But after what happened 6 months ago, I'll never go up there alone again. It was around 8 p.m., and I was at home, sitting at my computer, checking emails and browsing random sites to unwind after a long day. Suddenly, my internet crapped out, which isn't unusual since I use the building's Wi-Fi, and it tends to glitch at peak hours. Normally, I just wait it out, but I was in the middle of reading 3 important emails, and I hadn't opened any other tabs, so I couldn't afford to lose them. I decided to head to a friend's place in another building nearby. They're always cool about letting me use their internet when mine goes down, so I grabbed my phone and keys and stepped into the hallway. As I locked my door, I heard a loud thump from above, like something heavy had landed on the roof. It startled me, but I brushed it off, figuring it was just someone up there drinking or messing around. It happens sometimes. People like the roof for late-night hangouts. I made my way downstairs and out of the building, but as I stepped outside, I heard another sound, a sharp rattle, like metal shaking, coming from the roof. I glanced up, squinting into the darkness, but couldn't see anything. My gut twitched with unease, but I told myself it was probably just a clumsy drunk tripping over a chair or something. Shaking my head, I kept walking toward my friend's place. A few minutes later, as I neared their building, I heard a rustling in a nearby bush. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to stay calm. It's just a cat or a lizard, I thought, quickening my pace. I got to my friend's building and sat down on the curb near the entrance, pulling out my phone to pick up where I'd left off with my emails. The street was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of traffic in the distance. I was about 5 minutes into reading when I heard another rattle, this time closer, like something was moving nearby. My skin prickled, and a bad feeling started creeping up my spine, but I kept my eyes on my phone, trying to focus. Then, out of instinct, I looked up at the roof of the building. My breath caught in my throat. There was a guy up there, crouching at the edge, peering down at me. I froze, my mind racing to make sense of it. He was wearing tattered pants and a black hoodie, but what stood out was his face, or lack of one. He had on a white party store mask, the kind you'd see at a cheap Halloween costume shop, with a huge hand-drawn smile scrawled across it in black marker. The sight sent a jolt of fear through me, but I tried to play it cool, telling myself he was just some weirdo enjoying the view. I forced a nervous laugh and shone my phone's flashlight at him, hoping to get a better look. The mask's creepy smile seemed to glow in the light, and his head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. I looked back at my phone, my hand shaking slightly, and tried to focus on the email. But I could feel his eyes on me. A few minutes later, I glanced up again, and my heart nearly stopped. He was leaning farther over the edge now, his masked face sticking out, the damn smile even more unsettling in the dim light. This wasn't just some prankster, this felt like something out of a horror story. I was alone out here, just me and this creep, and I had no idea what he wanted. My instincts screamed at me to move, so I stood up, pocketed my phone, and started walking back to my building, trying to keep my steps steady despite the panic rising in my chest. I made it back without incident, and by the time I reached my building, I was starting to laugh at myself. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe he was just some kid pulling a stupid prank. I was in a good mood, joking to myself about how silly I'd been when I glanced up at the roof of my own building. My blood turned to ice. There he was again, the same guy, crouched on my roof, staring down at me with that same creepy, drawn-on smile. My good mood evaporated, replaced by sinking dread. How the hell had he gotten here so fast? I'd walked straight back, and there's no way he could have beaten me unless he'd sprinted across the complex and climbed up before I arrived. My mind scrambled for explanations, but none of them made sense. I stood there, frozen, staring up at him. He tilted his head again, like he was curious about my reaction, that mask making him look like some twisted cartoon character. I snapped out of it and hurried inside, my heart pounding as I locked the door behind me. The internet was working again, so I tried to distract myself, but I couldn't shake the image of that guy on the roof. I kept pacing, checking the locks, telling myself he was gone. Later that night, I finally started to relax. I crawled into bed, exhausted, and after a while, I began to drift off, the tension easing from my body. Then I heard it, tapping on my balcony window. My eyes snapped open, and I lay there, paralyzed, hoping I'd imagined it. The sound came again, soft but deliberate, like someone was rapping their knuckles against the glass. My apartment's on a high floor, so there's no way anyone could be out there unless they'd climbed down from a roof. I forced myself to get up, my legs shaky, and crept toward the balcony's glass door. My hands trembled as I gripped the curtain, hesitating. I took a deep breath and yanked it back. I screamed. There he was, the guy I'd started calling Roofman in my head, hanging upside down from the roof, his masked face pressed close to the glass, that damn smile staring right at me. His head tilted again, like he was amused by my terror. I stumbled back, my scream echoing in the quiet apartment. He climbed down onto the balcony, his movements slow and deliberate, and knocked on the glass door, like he was politely asking to be let in. My heart was in my throat, but I didn't move. He knocked again, harder this time, the sound sharp and insistent. When I still didn't respond, he started banging, lightly at first, then with more force, until he rammed his body into the glass. The door cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across it. That snapped me out of my stupor. I scrambled to my front door, fumbling with the lock, my hands slick with sweat. I heard the glass shatter behind me as I flung the door open and ran into the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I sprinted to my neighbor's apartment and pounded on the door, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. I glanced back down the hall and saw my door swing open. Roofman stepped out, his masked face turning toward me, that creepy smile still in place. My neighbor opened his door just in time, his eyes wide with concern as he saw my panicked state. I pointed down the hall, my voice failing me. He looked and saw Roofman standing there, staring us down. Then, without warning, the guy broke into a sprint, charging straight at us like a madman. My neighbor yanked me inside and slammed the door shut, locking it just as a loud bang shook the frame. Roofman was ramming the door, each impact louder than the last, relentless and terrifying. We stood there, braced for the worst, but after a while, the banging stopped. We heard footsteps retreating, and then silence. We called the cops, and they searched the entire complex, but Roofman was gone. No trace of him, no sign of where he disappeared to. My neighbor, bless him, let me crash at his place for a while, saying he understood and would have my back if anything like that happened again. I can't thank him enough for that. I'm still staying with him, sitting here now, watching TV, trying to feel normal again. It's been 6 months since that night, and I haven't seen Roofman since, thank God. But the thought of him still out there, maybe watching someone else, maybe waiting for another chance, keeps me up at night. I don't know what scares me more, that horrific night or the fact that he could come back, and I'd never see it coming. I'm a young guy from Lithuania, a small country wedged between Russia and the Baltic Sea, where life feels a bit like a second world hustle to keep up with the rest of the European Union. Growing up, my dad pushed me to be tough, so I've been boxing since I was 6, building a resilience that makes it hard to scare me. But what happened to me and my friends at an abandoned barn in the suburbs of our city is something I still can't explain, and it shook me to my core. After finishing school, my buddy Veza and I started a small business with help from his dad. We'd work long days, and to unwind, we'd drive around the city, sipping beers, picking up girls, and hanging out at local bars. It was fun for a while, but the routine got old fast. We wanted something new, a quieter spot to chill without the usual crowd. We asked around, and some friends told us about a place in the suburbs where people went to smoke weed. It was secluded, no cops, no nosy neighbors, just a small parking lot, some sparse trees, and an old, creepy barn that had been abandoned for ages. The barn didn't faze us. It sounded perfect for kicking back. We found the coordinates and started going there once or twice a week. The first time we pulled up, around 7 p.m., the place looked as run down as we'd been told. The barn loomed in the distance, its weathered sagging, windows long gone, and the surrounding trees casting eerie shadows in the fading light. But it was quiet, exactly what we wanted. We'd park, crack open a few beers, and talk about work, girls, or whatever was on our minds. For about a month, it was our go-to spot, a peaceful escape from the grind. Then things started getting weird. It was a Friday evening springtime around 8 p.m., and the sun was setting, plunging the area into a dusky gloom. Veza and I were in the car, sipping beers and chatting casually, when we heard a strange noise from the back seat, a metallic crisp sound, like a pin spring being twisted. We froze, exchanging confused looks. What the hell was that? Veza asked, his voice low. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, and we went back to talking. But the sound kept going, growing louder, more insistent, until it started creeping us out. It wasn't just a faint creak. It was sharp, deliberate, like something was moving back there. We got out of the car to check, our boots crunching on the gravel. The air felt heavy, the silence of the suburbs pressing in around us. We opened the back doors, peered inside, and found nothing. No loose springs, no junk, just our empty beer cans. The second we stepped back, the noise stopped, like it had been waiting for us to look. I suggested it might be the seat springs settling, a weak excuse, but it calmed us down enough to get back in the car. The rest of the evening passed without incident, and we laughed it off, chalking it up to the car being old. 3 or 4 days later, we went back to the barn, this time too tired to talk much. We brought my laptop to watch a movie, the screen's glow lighting up the car's interior as the darkness deepened outside. We were about 20 minutes into the film when that damn metallic sound started again, louder than before, sharp and grating. Veza's eyes widened. "What the hell is that noise?" he said, his voice tight with unease. I tried to stay calm, not wanting to freak him out more. "Stay here," I told him. "I'll check the trunk." I stepped out, the cool night air hitting my face, and popped the trunk. The second I did, the sound stopped, just like last time. I stood there, staring into the empty trunk, my heart beating a little faster. Seat springs couldn't make a noise that loud, and the car's engine had been off for ages, so it wasn't that either. I got back in the driver's seat, trying to act unfazed. "Well, that was some weird shit," I said, forcing a laugh. Before Vesa could respond, my phone, which was in my pocket, started ringing. I pulled it out, expecting a friend's name on the screen, but there was no caller ID, just a blank black display. The ringtone wasn't even mine. It was some eerie, unfamiliar chime that made my skin crawl. I held the phone, staring at it as it rang in my hand, the screen still dark. Then it stopped, right as I unlocked it. Vesa and I locked eyes, both of us spooked but trying not to show it. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. We drove home, the silence between us heavy, neither of us wanting to admit how much that had rattled us. When I got home, I messaged another close friend, David, about what happened. He laughed, calling me out for trying to pull a prank. I knew he wouldn't believe me, so I invited him to come with us next time we went to the barn. "You'll see," I told him. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last damn time I ever set foot in that place. Almost 2 weeks later, we went back. It was around 9 p.m., the sky pitch black, the barn a shadowy, hulking shape in the distance. I was driving, Vesa was in the front passenger seat, and David sat in the middle of the back seat, joking about how we were wasting his time. We were laughing, talking about girls, and making fun of each other, the mood light despite the creepy setting. Then that metallic spring sound started again, softer this time, but unmistakable. I told everyone to quiet down, and we listened, the noise echoing in the car's confined space. David smirked. "You guys are kidding, right? This is the lamest trick I've ever seen," he said, rolling his eyes. Vesa and I snapped back. "We're not doing this." Our voices were sharp, and I could feel my pulse quickening. Before we could argue further, my phone rang again, that same creepy ringtone cutting through the silence. I pulled it out, and just like before, the screen was black, no caller ID. I showed it to David, who leaned forward, his smirk fading. Then Vesa's phone started ringing too, with exact same ringtone. My stomach dropped. "Okay, this is really weird," David said, his voice cracking. "We should get out of here, guys." I tried to play it tough, mocking him. "What? You're not scared, are you?" But inside, I was freaking out, adrenaline surging through me. Then the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced happened. My phone made a sound, not a ring, but a voice low and echoing, like it was coming from somewhere deep inside the device. "You don't belong here," it said, clear as day, but it wasn't my voice, Vesa's or David's. It was something else, cold and inhuman. My body went rigid, every hair standing on end. It felt like the temperature in the car dropped 20 degrees in a second. Vesa's breath was visible in the air, and David's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. There was no way we could have faked that. The voice cut through us like a knife, and we all felt it, the raw primal fear of something we couldn't understand. Panic took over. I fumbled with the keys, trying to start the car, but the engine wouldn't turn over. "What the hell, dude? Go, go!" Vesa shouted, his voice breaking. David was yelling too, his hands gripping the back of my seat. I kept turning the key, my hand shaking, until finally, the engine roared to life. The headlights flicked on, and what we saw in that moment froze us to our course. 3 shadowy figures stood directly in front of the car, their forms dark and indistinct, like they were made of smoke or ink. They weren't people, not exactly. They had no faces, no features, just tall looming shapes that seemed to absorb the light. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I switched the headlights off, my hands moving on instinct, and floored the gas, the tires screeching as we peeled out of the parking lot. It was hard to see without the lights, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. A few seconds later, I turned the headlights back on, praying the figures were gone. They were. The road ahead was empty, the barn shrinking in the rearview mirror. David was trying to calm Vesa down, who was shaking worse than any of us. I glanced at them in the mirror. "Did you guys see what I saw?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They nodded, their faces ashen. We'd all seen those shadows, no question about it. We sped through the suburbs, breaking every speed limit, but I didn't care. There were hardly any cops out here, and I just needed to feel safe again. We ended up at a shopping center parking lot, brightly lit with a few people milling around. We sat there in silence for almost half an hour, too shaken to speak. When the adrenaline finally wore off, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The phone ringing and the metallic sound could maybe be explained. Radio interference to glitch something. But that voice? Those shadows? The sudden cold? There was no rational explanation. Our car has almost no engine bay, so we would have seen anyone sneaking up. And there was nothing in front of us but open gravel. We never went back to that place. We warned our friends to stay away, too, telling them something bad was going on out there. Later, I found out the barn belonged to some Christian dean who died in a strange way years ago. Nobody knows exactly how he died, and the barn's been abandoned ever since. I know a lot of people won't believe this story, and hell, I wouldn't either if I hadn't lived it. But those shadows, that voice, they were real, and they wanted us gone. If anyone has an explanation for what we saw, I'd love to hear it, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I'm a young woman working at an animal shelter, a job I love despite the long hours and emotional toll. The shelter is a bustling place, filled with the barks and meows of animals waiting for their forever homes, and I spend my days feeding, cleaning, and caring for them. It's rewarding, but it can attract some odd characters, people who linger too long or ask questions that feel off. I'm used to handling myself, but nothing prepared me for what happened one evening after my shift. It was late, around 7 p.m., and I'd stayed past closing to finish some paperwork and check on a new litter of puppies. The shelter was quiet, the other staff already gone, and the only sounds were the occasional whine from the kennels and the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. As I locked up the main building, I noticed two guys hanging around the front entrance. One of them, a tall, wiry man with a scruffy beard, had been in earlier that day with his friend, a shorter guy with a buzz cut and a nervous energy. They'd come in asking about adopting a dog, but the tall one had been weirdly flirty, making comments about my smile and leaning too close while I showed them the kennels. I'd brushed it off, keeping things professional, but his attention had left me uneasy. Now, seeing them again, my stomach tightened. Most visitors don't come back after hours. "Hey, you're still here," the tall one called out as I stepped outside, his voice overly friendly, like we were old friends. His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes, which had a cold, calculating glint. I forced a polite nod, clutching my keys in one hand and my phone in the other, ready to dial for help if I needed to. "Yeah, just finishing up," I said, keeping my tone neutral as I started walking toward my car, parked about 50 yards away in the lot. The shorter guy trailed behind his friend, his hands stuffed in his pockets, glancing around like he was watching for something, or someone. The tall one kept pace with me, his steps deliberate, closing the distance between us. "You know, we were thinking about that dog you showed us earlier," he said, his voice smooth but laced with something unsettling. "Maybe you could tell us more about it, over a drink or something." He flashed that same creepy smile, and my skin prickled. I quickened my pace, my heart starting to race. "Sorry, I've got plans," I said firmly, hoping to shut him down. But he didn't take the hint. "Come on, don't be like that," he pressed, his tone shifting from fake charm to something harder, more insistent. "We're having a little party tonight. You should come. It'll be fun." I could feel the air growing heavier, the parking lot stretching out endlessly before me. My car was still too far away, and the shelter building was now behind us, its locked doors offering no refuge. I glanced at the shorter guy, hoping he might be less threatening, but he was staring at me now, his nervous energy replaced by a quiet intensity that made my blood run cold. "I'm good, thanks," I said, my voice sharper now, trying to sound confident despite the fear creeping up my spine. I was almost to my car when the tall one stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "You're being rude," he said, his smile gone, his eyes narrowing. "We just want to talk." That's when I saw it, a glint of metal in his hand. He was holding a knife, not brandishing it, but letting it catch the light just enough for me to notice. My heart stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The shorter guy moved closer, his hand brushing his jacket pocket, and I realized he might be armed too. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm, my mind racing for a way out. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said, raising my hand slightly, trying to de-escalate while scanning the lot for anyone who might help. But the place was deserted, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows across the asphalt. They started herding me toward the street, away from my car, their steps slow and deliberate, like predators cornering their prey. The tall one kept talking, his voice low and menacing now. "Just come with us. It's not a big deal. You'll have a good time." His words were a lie, and I knew it. Every instinct screamed that if I went with them, I wouldn't come back. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept moving, trying to buy time, my eyes darting for an escape. We were nearing the edge of the lot, the street just beyond, when I remembered my car and what was inside it. I parked under a streetlight, and my dog, a massive, fiercely protective beast I'd adopted from the shelter, was waiting in the back seat. He wasn't just big. He had a bark that could shake walls and a temperament that made him wary of strangers. I left him in the car with the windows cracked, knowing I'd only be inside for a bit. Now, he was my only shot. "Okay, fine," I said, faking compliance, my voice trembling, but steady enough to sell it. "Let me just grab my purse from my car." The tall one hesitated, his eyes narrowing, but he nodded, gesturing for me to lead the way. The shorter guy followed close behind, his hands still in his pocket. I walked toward my car, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. As we got closer, I heard a low growl from inside, and relief washed over me. My dog had seen them. I reached the driver's side door, my hand shaking as I fumbled with the keys, making a show of unlocking it slowly. The growling grew louder, turning into a deep, guttural snarl that made the tall guy pause. "What's that?" he asked, his voice sharp, taking a step back. I didn't answer. Instead, I yanked the door open, and my dog exploded out, a blur of fur and teeth, barking so ferociously it echoed across the lot. The two guys stumbled back, their confidence shattering. The tall one's knife clattered to the ground as he raised his hands, shouting, "Whoa, whoa, call it off." The shorter guy was already running, his footsteps pounding against the pavement as he bolted toward the street. My dog lunged forward, stopping just short of the tall guy, his hackles raised, his barks relentless. I grabbed his collar, holding him back, but I let him keep barking, his massive presence enough to make the guy's face drain of color. "Get the hell out of here," I yelled, my voice raw with fear and anger. "Don't ever come back." The tall guy didn't need to be told twice. He turned and sprinted after his friend, disappearing into the darkness beyond the streetlights. I stood there, clutching my dog's collar, my legs trembling so badly I thought I'd collapse. My dog quieted down, pressing his warm body against me, his tail wagging slightly as if to say he had my back. I climbed into the car, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. The knife was still on the ground, glinting in the streetlight, but I wasn't about to touch it. I started the engine and drove straight home, my dog's steady breathing in the back seat, the only thing keeping me grounded. When I got home, I called my boss and told her everything. She was horrified and promised to file a police report and ban the guys from the shelter. I gave her their descriptions, every detail I could remember, from the tall one's scruffy beard to the shorter guy's buzz cut and nervous twitch. The police came by the next day, but they didn't have much to go on without names or clear evidence, though they took the knife for fingerprints. I haven't seen those guys since, and I hope to God I never do. Work feels different now, though. I'm hyper-aware of every visitor, every lingering glance. I keep my dog with me whenever I close up, and I've started carrying pepper spray, just in case. Those guys wanted something bad. I don't know what, and I don't want to. All I know is I'm alive because of my dog, and I'll never take him for granted again. When I was 13, I lived with my family in an old, rambling house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where the streets were lined with towering oaks and everyone knew each other's names. The house was a fixer-upper, full of creaky floorboards and drafty windows, but it had character, high ceilings, a wraparound porch, and a sprawling backyard that felt like a playground. My parents loved it, even if it needed constant repairs. That summer, they decided to go on a weekend getaway, a rare treat for them, and left me home alone for the first time. I was thrilled at the prospect of having the place to myself. No bedtime, no chores, just me, a stack of snacks, and the TV. They trusted me to be responsible, and I was determined to prove them right. My mom gave me a long list of instructions. Lock the doors, don't open them for strangers, call the neighbors if anything goes wrong, and I nodded along, half listening, eager for them to leave. The first night was everything I'd hoped for. I stayed up late, sprawled on the living room couch, watching horror movies and eating way too much popcorn. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. I felt like the king of my own castle, invincible in my little bubble of freedom. Around midnight, I started to get sleepy, so I turned off the TV, grabbed a glass of water, and headed to the kitchen to rinse out my popcorn bowl. The kitchen was at the back of the house, with a big window overlooking the backyard and a door leading outside. I was standing at the sink, the water running, when I heard it, a soft click, like a latch being undone. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was just the house settling, a sound I'd heard 100 times before. Then I heard another noise, this one unmistakable, a faint creak from the back door, like someone was easing it open. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I froze, the dish sponge still in my hand, water dripping onto the counter. I turned off the faucet, the silence suddenly deafening, and strained to listen. There it was again, a slow, deliberate creak, followed by the soft thud of a footstep on the hardwood floor. My stomach dropped, a cold wave of fear washing over me. This wasn't the wind or an old pipe. Someone was in the house. I stood there, paralyzed, my eyes darting to the kitchen doorway. The light from the living room spilled into the hall, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and sway. My mind raced, trying to remember where I'd left my phone. On the couch, too far away. The back door was just a few feet from me, and I could hear more sounds now, quiet, careful steps, like someone was trying not to be heard. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the floor. Then I saw it, a shadow moving across the hallway, tall and indistinct, but definitely human. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I don't know how I found the courage, but I dropped the sponge and tiptoed toward the counter, grabbing a butter knife from the dish rack. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all I had. I crept toward the doorway, my bare feet silent on the linoleum, every muscle tensed. I peered around the corner, and that's when I saw him, a man, standing in the hallway, his back to me. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and he was holding a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat, and I ducked back into the kitchen, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the butter knife. He hadn't seen me, but he was moving toward the living room, his steps slow and deliberate, like he was searching for something, or someone. Panic took over, but I forced myself to think. I couldn't stay in the kitchen. It was a dead end, with only the back door as an exit, and he'd come in that way. My only chance was to get upstairs to my parents' room, where there was a phone on the nightstand. I waited until I heard his footsteps move farther into the living room, then slipped out of the kitchen, moving as quietly as I could. The hallway felt endless, every creak of the floorboards deafening in my ears. I reached the staircase and started climbing, my hands gripping the banister, praying the old wood wouldn't betray me. Halfway up, I heard a noise from below, a soft rustle, like he'd turned back toward the hall. My heart lurched, and I bolted the rest of the way, my feet pounding against the steps. I made it to the upstairs landing and darted into my parents' room, but I didn't go for the phone. Instead, I ran to their closet, a small cramped space packed with clothes and boxes. I squeezed inside, pulling the door shut behind me, and crouched in the dark, my knees pressed against my chest. The smell of mothballs and my mom's perfume filled my nose, but all I could focus on was the sound of my own breathing, loud and ragged in the confined space. I clutched the butter knife, its dull blade useless but comforting, and tried to calm my racing heart. I told myself to stay quiet, to wait it out. Maybe he'd take what he wanted and leave. Maybe he didn't know I was here. Minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. I strained to listen, catching faint sounds from downstairs, drawers opening, objects shifting, the low murmur of a voice, though I couldn't make out words. Was he talking to himself? To someone else? The thought made my skin crawl. I kept expecting to hear footsteps on the stairs, but they never came. Instead, the noises stayed downstairs, moving from room to room, methodical and unhurried. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, if my horror movie marathon had made me paranoid. But then I remembered the knife in his hand, the way the blade had caught the light, and I knew this was real. I don't know how long I stayed in that closet, maybe an hour, maybe more. My legs cramped, my hands ached from gripping the knife, and sweat trickled down my back despite the cool night air. Finally, I heard a new sound, sirens, faint at first, then growing louder, closer. Relief flooded through me, but it was tinged with fear. What if he heard them too? What if he came looking for me? I stayed put, too scared to move, until I heard voices outside, shouts, commands, the crackle of a radio. The police. I waited, listening as the back door slammed shut, followed by the sound of running footsteps fading into the distance. Then silence. I didn't leave the closet until I heard a loud knock on the front door and a voice calling, "Police. Anyone home?" Even then, I moved slowly, my body stiff and trembling. I crept out of the closet, the butter knife still in my hand, and made my way downstairs. The living room was a mess, cushions tossed, drawers pulled open, but the man was gone. I opened the front door to find two officers, their faces serious but kind. They told me a neighbor had seen someone sneaking around the back of the house and called 911. They'd caught the guy a few blocks away, trying to hide in a yard. He was a known thief, they said, but what they found on him chilled me to the bone, a key to our back door. No one knew where he'd gotten it or why he had it. The lock hadn't been forced, and my parents swore they'd never given out spares. The police took my statement, and my parents rushed home, wrapping me in hugs and apologies. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. The image of that man in the hallway burned into my mind. We changed all the locks, installed a security system, and my parents never left me alone in the house again. Years later, I still don't know what he wanted, money, jewelry, or something worse. The uncertainty haunts me, a nagging fear that he had a plan I'll never understand. All I know is I'm lucky to be alive, and I'll never take being home alone for granted again. I've always been a sleepwalker, ever since I was a kid, but it's usually harmless, wandering to the kitchen, mumbling nonsense, or rearranging pillows in my sleep. My family's used to it, and I've learned to laugh it off even if it's a little embarrassing. But what happened when I house sat for my older brother a few years ago was different. It wasn't just sleepwalking. It was something darker, something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. My brother and his wife had bought a fixer-upper in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, the kind of place where the houses have history and the yards are overgrown with charm. Their house was old, with creaky floors, peeling wallpaper, and a basement that felt like it belonged in a horror movie. They were heading out of town for a week-long vacation, and since I was between jobs, I offered to stay at their place to keep an eye on things, water the plants, feed their cat, make sure the pipes didn't burst. I was excited for a change of scenery, a chance to have a big house to myself, maybe binge some movies and enjoy the peace and quiet. My brother gave me the rundown, where the spare keys were, how to work the finicky thermostat, and a half-joking warning to stay out of the basement unless you have to. I laughed it off, figuring he was just messing with me. The basement was where the water heater and fuse box were, so I'd only need to go down there if something went wrong. The first night was uneventful. I settled into the guest room on the second floor, a cozy space with a lumpy mattress and a window overlooking the backyard. The cat, a fluffy tabby named Muffin, curled up at the foot of the bed, purring softly. I fell asleep easily, the hum of the house's old pipes lulling me into a deep, dreamless slumber. But when I woke up the next morning, I wasn't in bed. I was standing in the basement, barefoot on the cold concrete floor, my hands pressed against a heavy wooden door at the far end of the room. The door was old, its paint chipped and peeling, with no handle, just a smooth, blank surface that seemed to absorb the dim light from the single bulb overhead. My heart was racing, my skin clammy with sweat, and I had no memory of how I'd gotten there. I stumbled back, my breath hitching, and looked around. The basement was a maze of shadows, cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and cobwebs that clung to the exposed beams. The air was damp, heavy, with a musty smell of mildew, and something sharper, almost metallic. I was in my pajamas, my feet freezing against the rough floor, and the silence was so thick it felt like it was pressing against my ears. I turned and ran up the stairs, my legs shaky, slamming the basement door behind me. Muffin was waiting at the top, her eyes wide and unblinking, like she'd been watching the door the whole time. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just my sleepwalking acting up, maybe triggered by the new environment. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. There was something about that door, something that made my stomach churn. I called my brother that morning, keeping my tone casual, and asked about the basement. "Oh, it's just storage," he said, his voice light. "Old junk, nothing special." Why? I didn't tell him I'd woken up down there, too embarrassed to admit how freaked out I was. Instead, I mumbled something about checking the water heater and let it go. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, I locked the basement door before bed, double-checking the latch, and pushed a heavy chair against it for good measure. I told myself it was silly, that I was being paranoid, but I wasn't taking any chances. I went to sleep with the TV on low, hoping the background noise would keep me anchored. It didn't. The next morning, I woke up in the basement again, standing in front of that same damn door. This time, my hands were gripping the edges, like I'd been trying to pry it open. My fingers ached, my nails chipped from scraping against the wood, and there was a faint electric hum in the air, like static crawling over my skin. I gasped, stumbling back, and nearly tripped over a stack of boxes. The bulb flickered above me, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. Muffin was at the top of the stairs again, her tail puffed up, letting out a low, uneasy yowl. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and I ran upstairs, slamming the door so forcefully the frame rattled. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I wasn't going back down there. For the rest of the week, it kept happening. Every night, no matter what I did, locking the door, piling furniture against it, even tying a bell to the knob to wake me if it opened, I'd wake up in the basement, always in front of that door. Sometimes I was just standing there, staring at it, my hands hovering inches from the wood. Other times, I was pressing against it, my body trembling with effort, like something was pulling me toward it. The electric hum was always there, faint but persistent, and it left me with a headache that lingered for hours. I started to dread going to sleep, chugging coffee to stay awake, but exhaustion always won. Each morning, I'd find myself in that cold, dark basement, the door looming like a silent threat. The worst night was the last one. I tried everything, sleeping on the couch, leaving all the lights on, even playing loud music to keep myself alert. But when I woke up, I was in the basement again, my hands flat against the door, and this time I felt it, a presence heavy and oppressive, like someone was standing right behind me. My skin prickled, every nerve screaming that I wasn't alone. I didn't dare turn around, too terrified of what I might see. The air was thick, the electric hum louder now, buzzing in my ears like a swarm of insects. I whispered, "Please, leave me alone," my voice barely audible, trembling with fear. The hum stopped abruptly, and for a split second, the silence was worse, absolute, suffocating. Then I heard a creak, faint but unmistakable, like the door was about to open. I bolted, my feet slipping on the concrete as I sprinted up the stairs, not stopping until I was in the living room, the morning light streaming through the windows. When my brother and his wife got back, I was a wreck, pale, jumpy, with dark circles under my eyes. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I didn't tell them everything, just that I'd been sleepwalking a lot. My brother gave me a funny look, then said, "You didn't go in the basement, did you?" My stomach dropped. I admitted I had, and his face tightened, like he'd been dreading that answer. After some prodding, he told me the truth. The house had been sold dirt cheap because of its history. Years ago, a teenage girl had taken her own life in the basement, right by that door. The real estate agent had mentioned it offhand, like it was no big deal, but my brother had noticed strange things since moving in. Cold spots, odd noises, a feeling of being watched. He hadn't told me, because he didn't want to scare me, but now he looked guilty, like he should have warned me. I never stayed at their house again. I don't know what was behind that door, and I don't want to. Was it just my sleepwalking, amplified by an old house and a creepy story? Or was something down there, pulling me toward it night after night? The electric hum, the presence, the way Muffin stared at that door, felt too real to dismiss. I still sleepwalk sometimes, but I've never ended up anywhere like that basement again. And every time I visit my brother, I stay upstairs, far away from that door, praying I never feel that hum again. The moment I realized someone was stalking me through my own photographs, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted, tilting my world into a disorienting spiral. It began with a nagging sense of déjà vu, a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of my shots, barely noticeable at first. But as I pored over my recent work, the truth emerged, undeniable and terrifying, sinking its claws into my reality. My name is Ethelred, a freelance photographer scraping by in the pulsing heart of the city. My camera is my lifeline, my way of capturing the raw, vibrant rhythm of urban life, street scenes bursting with chaos, local events buzzing with energy, architectural marvels standing stoic against the skyline. I've shot it all. But now, sitting in my dimly lit studio, my hands trembling as I sift through hundreds of digital images, I realize I've captured something far more sinister than I ever intended. It started 3 weeks ago. I was reviewing a set of photos from a farmer's market downtown, admiring the vivid stacks of produce and the animated gestures of vendors hawking their wares. My eyes lingered on the colors, the deep reds of tomatoes, the glossy greens of zucchini, when something snagged my attention. In the corner of one frame, partially obscured by a pile of wooden crates, stood a figure in a dark hoodie. Their face was hidden, their stance unnaturally still amidst the market's lively bustle. I frowned, zooming in on my laptop screen, but the image was too grainy to reveal any details. Shrugging it off as a quirk of the crowd, I continued editing, my fingers dancing over the keyboard. But as I flipped through more shots, a chill crept up my spine, turning my blood to ice. The same figure appeared in the background of 5 more photos, always at a distance, always watching. Their hooded silhouette was unmistakable, constant in the chaos of the market. I rubbed my eyes, certain I was imagining things. "Get it together, Eth," I muttered, pushing back from my desk, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I needed air, needed to clear the fog from my mind. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out into the cool evening, hoping the city's hum would ground me. The next day, I had a shoot at the new modern art museum across town, a sleek structure of glass and steel that had been the talk of the city. As I set up my tripod in the cavernous main gallery, the polished floors reflecting the stark lighting, I pushed thoughts of the hooded figure to the back of my mind. This was a big contract, one I couldn't afford to mess up. I focused on the sculptures, their abstract forms twisting under my lens, and let the rhythm of the work consume me. Hours later, back in my studio, I began reviewing the day's shots. My hands started to shake as I scrolled through the images. There, in the reflection of a polished chrome sculpture, stood the unmistakable silhouette, hooded, motionless, watching. "No," I whispered, my voice echoing in the empty studio, swallowed by the hum of my computer. "This can't be happening." But it was. The figure's presence was undeniable, a dark stain on the pristine gallery. Over the next 2 weeks, the figure haunted every set of photos I took. At Riverside Park, they lurked behind a drooping willow tree, half hidden by its swaying branches. At the bustling train station, they stood partially obscured behind a concrete pillar, their hooded face turned toward me. Even at a rooftop bar, where I'd gone to drown my growing paranoia in cheap whiskey, I spotted them in a shot of the crowd below, a glimpse of that damned hood standing out against the neon glow. Sleep became a stranger. Food lost its taste. My work suffered, clients firing off emails about missed deadlines and unfocused shots. But how could I explain? Who would believe me that a phantom was photobombing my life, turning my art into a nightmare? Today, I finally mustered the courage to call my oldest friend, Dunstan. We met at a crowded coffee shop, the clatter of cups and hum of conversation offering a small comfort. Dunstan slid into the booth across from me, his brow furrowing as he took in my haggard appearance. "Mate, you look like hell," he said, concern lacing his voice. "What's going on?" I took a shaky breath, the steam from my untouched coffee curling between us. "I need you to look at something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me I'm not crazy." I pulled out my laptop, my fingers clumsy as I opened the folder of photos. As I flipped through the images, pointing out the hooded figure in each one, Dunstan's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to raw fear. "Christ, he breathed, leaning back in the booth, his eyes wide. "How long has this been happening?" 3 weeks, I said, running a hand through my unkempt hair, the strands greasy from days without a shower. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, or my mind playing tricks. But it's in every set, Don. Every single one. Dunstan fell silent, absently stirring his untouched coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. Had he gone to the police? He asked after a long pause. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh even to my own ears. And tell them what? That there's a mysterious figure photobombing my work? They think I was nuts. Maybe, Dunstan conceded, his voice soft. But this isn't normal, that someone's clearly following you. I know, I said, my voice cracking as the weight of it all pressed down on me. But why? I'm nobody special. Just a guy with a camera. Dunstan reached across the table, squeezing my arm, his grip firm and grounding. We'll figure this out, mate. I promise. As we left the coffee shop, the weight on my shoulders lifted slightly. Sharing the burden had helped, even if we were no closer to answers. But as we stepped onto the crowded sidewalk, Dunstan suddenly froze, his hand tightening on my sleeve. He said, his voice tight. Don't turn around, but I think I see him. My heart began to race, a frantic drumbeat in my chest. Where? I asked, my mouth dry. Across the street by the newsstand. Dark hoodie, just standing there, fighting every instinct screaming at me to bolt. I slowly turned, scanning the bustling street. And there he was, motionless amidst the flow of pedestrians, the hood obscuring his face, watching. My breath caught in my throat. Oh God, I choked out, my voice trembling. It's real. It's all real. Come on, Dunstan said, grabbing my arm and pulling me forward. We're getting out of here. We hurried down the sidewalk, weaving through the crowd, the city's noise a chaotic blur around us. I resisted the urge to look back, focusing on Dunstan's grip anchoring me. After a few blocks, he pulled me into the entrance of a subway station, the air thick with the scent of metal and sweat. Did we lose him? I gasped, bent over, hands on my knees, my lungs burning. Dunstan peered back up the stairs, his face tense. I think so. I don't see weight. My head snapped up, dread pooling in my gut. What? There's someone coming down the stairs. Hooded. I can't tell if it's the same person, but panic clawed at my throat. We have to go. Now. We raced through the turnstiles, ignoring the shouts of the station attendant. The platform was mercifully empty as we sprinted toward the approaching train, its headlights cutting through the dim tunnel. As the doors slid open, I glanced back. The hooded figure stood at the top of the escalator, a dark silhouette against the flickering fluorescent lights. We threw ourselves into the car just as the doors began to close, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. As the train pulled away, I caught a final glimpse of that featureless hood watching from the platform, unyielding, unrelenting. I slumped against the scratched plastic seat, my body trembling with adrenaline. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely audible over the rattle of the train. Dunstan ran a hand over his face, his own exhaustion mirroring mine. We need help, professional help. You mean like a shrink? I scoffed, the word dripping with bitterness. I'm not crazy, Don. No, not a shrink, he said, shaking his head, his voice firm. I've got a mate who used to be a detective. Private investigator now. If anyone can figure this out, it's him. I nodded, too drained to argue, my eyes drifting to the dark windows of the train, where my reflection stared back, hollow and haunted. As the train rattled through the tunnels, I closed my eyes, trying to still the racing thoughts, but all I could see was that damned hood. Always watching, always just out of reach. The next few days passed in a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. Dunstan's PI friend, a gruff ex-cop named Wolfie, asked endless questions, his voice rough as gravel as he pored over my photos. He set up surveillance around my apartment, a cramped walk-up in a noisy part of town, and followed me on shoots, his presence a small reassurance. But the hooded figure remained elusive, appearing only in my photographs, never where Wolfie's sharp eyes could spot him. It doesn't make any bloody sense, Wolfie growled, pacing my living room, the floor littered with empty coffee cups and takeout containers. None of us had slept much, the strain wearing us down. No one's that good at evading detection. It's like he only exists in your photos. I laughed, the sound hollow. echoing off the bare walls. Maybe I am going crazy after all. No, Dunstan said firmly, his voice cutting through the haze of my despair. We've all seen the pictures. This is real, Eth. Wolfie stopped pacing, a thoughtful look crossing his weathered face, his eyes narrowing as if piecing together a puzzle. What if that's the point? What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Think about it. This guy only shows up in your photos, never where anyone else can see him. It's like he's taunting you, driving you to the edge. His words sent a chill down my spine, the air in the room growing heavy. But why? I asked, my voice cracking. What did I do to deserve this? Wolfie shrugged, his broad shoulders lifting in a gesture of frustration. Could be random. Could be someone with a grudge. Hard to say without more to go on. So what do we do? Dunstan asked, his voice tight with urgency. Wolfie was quiet for a moment, then nodded to himself, a decision made. We set a trap. The plan was simple but terrifying, a gamble that made my stomach churn. I would do a photo walk through the city, hitting all my usual spots. Busy markets, quiet parks, crowded streets. Wolfie and Dunstan would shadow me, watching for anyone suspicious, while a team of Wolfie's contacts, ex-cops and security guys, positioned themselves strategically along the route, ready to move in if we spotted the hooded figure. As I stepped out of my apartment building the next morning, camera in hand, my heart pounded like a war drum. This had to work. I couldn't live like this anymore, jumping at shadows, seeing that hood in every crowd. I moved through the city on autopilot, snapping photos with shaking hands. Adjusting settings, changing lenses, every motion felt mechanical, my eyes scanning for threats. Every face was a potential stalker, every shadow a hiding place. But as the hours ticked by, there was no sign of my tormentor. By late afternoon, I was exhausted, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. We regrouped in a small park, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and distant traffic. Wolfie scowled, conferring with his team via earpiece, his voice low and frustrated. Nothing, he growled, yanking the earpiece out. Not a single sighting. Maybe he knew it was a setup, Dunstan suggested, his voice heavy with disappointment. I slumped onto a bench, cradling my camera, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. Or maybe he was never real to begin with, I said bitterly. Maybe I'm just losing my mind. Dunstan sat beside me, his face etched with concern. F. May, don't talk like that. We'll figure this out. But I barely heard him. My gaze had locked onto my camera's display as I flipped through the day's shots, my heart sinking with each image. There in shot after shot stood the hooded figure, always watching, always just out of reach. He was here, I whispered, my voice trembling, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. He was here the whole time. Dunstan leaned in, his eyes widening as he saw the photos. Bloody hell, he muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. How is this possible? Wolfie snatched the camera, his face darkening as he scrolled through the images, his jaw tight. I don't understand, he muttered, his voice low and dangerous. We had eyes everywhere. How did no one see him? I stood abruptly, my head spinning, the world tilting around me. This couldn't be happening. It defied all logic, all reason. I stumbled away from the bench, needing space, needing air to fill my burning lungs. And then I saw him, across the park, standing motionless beneath a gnarled oak tree, the hooded figure, his presence a violation of everything I understood. There, I shouted, pointing, my voice raw with desperation. He's right there. Dunstan and Wolfie whirled around, following my gaze, but their expressions remained confused, their eyes searching the empty park. F. Dunstan said softly, his voice laced with pity, "There's no one there." "What?" "No, he's right." I trailed off as I turned back to the tree. The figure was gone, the space beneath the oak empty, as if he'd never been there. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground, the grass cool against my palms. Dunstan rushed to my side, his words of comfort lost in the roaring in my ears. In that moment, a terrible truth crystallized, sharp and cutting. The hooded figure wasn't stalking me through my photographs. He was stalking me through my mind, a phantom I couldn't escape, a shadow that lived in the corners of my sanity. And as I sat there, trembling under the weight of that realization, I had no idea how to fight something that might not even exist outside my own fractured perception. The glowing red digits on the bedside clock read 2:13 a.m. when a sound yanked me from sleep, a muffled cry, low and guttural, like someone struggling against a crushing weight. I froze, every muscle taut, my breath shallow as I strained to listen, my eyes fixed on the shadowed ceiling of my hotel room. Maybe it was a dream, I told myself, a remnant of restless sleep. But then it came again, louder, sharper, and unmistakably real. It was no nightmare. The cry was coming from the room next door. I sat up, my heart hammering in my chest, the thin sheets tangling around my legs. It wasn't just any cry. It carried the raw edge of desperation, like a man pleading for his life or choking on his own fear. My first thought was a nightmare, someone caught in the throes of a bad dream. But this sound had a deliberate rhythm, too controlled, too aware to be the product of sleep. I glanced at the wall separating my room from the source, its beige surface suddenly ominous in the dim light filtering through the curtains. My mind raced, conjuring explanations. Jesus, I muttered, rubbing a hand down my face, the stubble rough against my palm. I've been on the road for work all week, hopping from one nondescript hotel to the next, each a blur of beige carpets and generic art. Tonight was supposed to be a simple pit stop, a chance to catch my breath before another grueling meeting. The hotel was nothing special, just another chain property off the highway, clean enough, cheap enough, with the faint hum of traffic lulling me to sleep. But now, with that eerie cry seeping through the wall, the room felt claustrophobic, the air thick with an unspoken threat. I threw off the covers and stood, my bare feet sinking into the carpet, the coolness grounding me for a moment. Maybe I was overthinking it. I could ignore it, crawl back into bed, and let sleep reclaim me. But the sound had burrowed under my skin, sharp and insistent, refusing to be dismissed. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, its screen casting a harsh blue glow as I flicked on flashlight. The beam swept across the room, stretching shadows into long, distorted shapes that seemed to writhe in the corners. For a moment, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the wall, separating my room from 213. I almost knocked. The impulse to check on whoever was there nearly overwhelming. But I stopped myself. What if someone was really hurt? What if knocking made things worse? Instead, I cracked open the door to the hallway, leaning out and squinting into the dimly lit corridor. It was empty, silent except for the distant hum of an ice machine echoing down the hall. I glanced at the room number on the door next to mine, 213. I was in 215. My pulse quickened as I ducked back inside, grabbing the hotel phone from the nightstand, its plastic cool against my sweaty palm. I dialed the front desk, my fingers trembling slightly. "Front desk, this is Claire. How can I help you?" The voice was polite, professional, but tinged with the weariness of a late-night shift. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady, though it wavered despite my efforts. "Hi. This might sound weird, but there's a lot of noise coming from the room next to mine. I think someone might need help or something." There was a pause, the faint sound of typing filtering through the receiver. "Which room are you in, sir?" 215. "It's coming from 213. Another pause, longer this time, the typing growing more deliberate. "Are you sure it's from 213? Her tone was hesitant, almost cautious. "Yeah, I'm sure." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the small space between the bed and the desk, the carpet muffling my steps. "There's these weird sounds, like someone's in pain or... I don't know." She hesitated again, her voice dropping slightly. "Sir, I'm not sure what to say. That room is supposed to be empty." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold, stopping me mid-step. "Empty?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "That can't be right. Hearing it right now." "I understand," she said, her tone calm, almost rehearsed, like she was reading from a script designed to soothe disgruntled guests. "But the system shows it's vacant. It was marked out of service earlier today for maintenance. No one should be in there." My grip tightened on the phone, frustration mixing with a growing unease. "But I'm telling you, someone's definitely in there. Can you send someone to check? She paused again, the silence stretching uncomfortably. I'll have security take a look. It might take a few minutes. Thanks, I said, the word clipped as I hung up, the receiver clattering back into its cradle. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my eyes locked on the wall, the cries now silent. The absence of sound was somehow louder, more oppressive, filling the room with a weight that pressed against my chest. I gripped the phone in my lap, waiting, each second dragging like molasses. What if she was right? What if the room was empty? Maybe there was a logical explanation. Pipes rattling into walls, an echo from another room. But the cries had been too human, too raw. Minutes crawled by, my gaze darting between the wall and the door, the unease at the base of my skull growing into a persistent itch. Just when I started to think I'd imagined it all, a loud metallic clank jolted me upright, my breath hitching. It came from 213, sharp and unmistakable, like something heavy being dropped onto the floor. Then silence again, thick and suffocating. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed the room key, its edges biting into my palm, and stepped back into the hall, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the empty corridor. I moved toward room 213, my steps slow, deliberate, as if the air itself resisted me. The door was plain, unassuming, identical to every other in the hall, but it loomed like a gateway to something unknown. I raised my hand, hesitating, the wood cool under my knuckles. I knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet. Nothing. I knocked again, harder, my pulse thudding in my ears. Hey, is everything okay in there? I called, my voice louder than I intended, echoing down the hall. No response. I pressed my ear to the door, straining for any sound, a shift, a breath, a whisper. Nothing but the faint hum of the building's systems. I tried the handle, more out of instinct than expectation, but it was locked, the metal unyielding. I was about to turn away when footsteps approached, light and hurried, from the end of the hall. A middle-aged man in a dark uniform came into view, a security badge clipped to his chest, his keys jangling softly. He nodded at me, his expression a mix of boredom and duty. Front desk said you heard something, he asked, his voice gruff, weathered by years of late-night calls. Yeah, I said, gesturing vaguely at the door, my hands unsteady. It was like someone was hurt or there was a lot of noise. It didn't sound good. He gave me a look somewhere between skeptical and tired, as if he'd heard this complaint 100 times. We've had reports like this before, he said, pulling a key from his belt. This wing's getting renovated soon. Sometimes pipes act up. Pipes don't cry out for help. I shot back, my pulse quickening, irritation flaring at his dismissive tone. He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation, and slipped the key into the lock. Let's have a look. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a dark room, only a thin sliver of hallway light slicing through the shadows. He flicked the switch by the door, and the overhead lights buzzed to life, bathing the space in a cold, sterile glow. It was empty. The bed was neatly made, the sheets crisp and untouched. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the highway's distant glow. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of a struggle, no trace of whoever had made those cries. The security guard took a step inside, his eyes sweeping the room with a practiced efficiency. See? Nothing here, he said, his tone flat, as if the matter was settled. I stood in the doorway, my gaze darting from corner to corner, the air in the room heavy, like it had been sealed off for too long. I moved further inside, my shoes sinking into the thick carpet, the silence pressing against my eardrums. But I heard it. I insisted, my voice low, almost pleading. I know what I heard. The guard shrugged, stepping toward the bathroom to check inside. It's quiet now. Maybe you just... He stopped short, his eyes locking onto something on the floor near the bed. I moved closer, the hairs on my arms standing on end. There, barely noticeable against the beige carpet, was a small dark stain, its edges irregular, glistening faintly as if fresh. What's that? I asked, my voice tight, a knot forming in my stomach. He bent down, inspecting it closely, his fingers hovering just above the mark. Might be spilled coffee, he said, though his voice lacked conviction, the words hollow. Could be anything. I stared at the stain, unease curling through me, cold and sharp. Doesn't look like coffee, I said, my eyes tracing its shape, the way it seemed to seep into the fibers. He straightened, rubbing the back of his neck, his posture stiff. I'll report it. Have the cleaning crew come by in the morning. For now, there's nothing else we can do. I wanted to argue, to demand more, but something in his eyes, a guarded flicker, a warning, made me back down. Are you sure no one was supposed to be here? I asked, my voice softer now, searching for reassurance. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. Positive. This room's been vacant all day. I nodded, though the doubt gnawed at me, relentless. All right, I muttered, but if I hear anything else, just call the front desk, he said, cutting me off, already moving toward the door. As I followed him out, I glanced back one last time. The guard stood there, staring at the stain, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. Something about his expression stuck with me, a quiet unease, like he knew more than he was letting on. Back in my room, I locked the door, double-checking the latch twice, the click of the bolt a small comfort. I lay back down, but the silence was oppressive, every creak of the building, every distant hum making my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the image of that dark stain, its presence a silent accusation. An hour passed, maybe more, my thoughts spiraling as I drifted in and out of a restless doze. Then a loud bang snapped me awake, my heart pounding so fiercely I could feel it in my throat. The sound was close, too close. I shot up, grabbing my phone, its screen casting a harsh blue light across the dark room. 4:07 a.m. I held my breath, listening, every nerve on edge. The bang came again, followed by a dragging noise, slow and deliberate, like something heavy being moved across the floor. It was coming from 213, no question. I threw on a shirt, my hand shaking as I fumbled with the buttons and moved to the door, my pulse a frantic rhythm. Just as my hand touched the handle, there was a knock, 3 sharp raps, urgent and loud, shattering the silence. I yanked the door open, expecting the guard again, my breath catching in my chest. But the hallway was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering faintly, the ice machines hummed the only sound. Hello? I called, my voice trembling, the words swallowed by the corridor's stillness. No response. I stepped back, my eyes darting to the door of 213. The lights inside were off, the room shrouded in darkness. But I could feel something watching, a presence lingering just beyond my sight. I shut my door, sliding the latch with a trembling hand, and leaned against it, my heart racing, the wood cool against my back. The rest of the night, I sat there, wide awake, waiting for the next sound, my body rigid with tension. But the silence stretched unbroken, an endless void, until the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in muted grays. When I checked out that morning, Claire was at the front desk, her polite smile firmly in place, though there was a tightness in her eyes, a subtle strain that hadn't been there before. I wanted to ask again about room 213 to demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe exhaustion, maybe the creeping fear that she wouldn't tell me the truth. As I walked to my car, the hotel looming behind me, I glanced up at the second-floor windows. In the window of room 213, the curtain shifted, just a small, almost imperceptible movement, a ripple in the fabric. Then nothing. I froze, my keys dangling in my hand, my breath clouding in the cool morning air. The parking lot was silent. The highways hummed distant and faint. I told myself it was the wind, a trick of the light. But as I drove away, the image of that curtain lingered, a quiet warning that whatever had happened in room 213 wasn't finished with me yet. The metallic taste of fear coated my tongue as I stood frozen in the pitch-black darkness, my camera hanging uselessly around my neck, its weight a cold reminder of my vulnerability. Above me, the floorboards of the hayloft creaked with slow, deliberate footsteps, each one echoing like a heartbeat in the cavernous barn. I wasn't alone. My name is Johanna Weber, a freelance photographer from Berlin, and what had started as an exciting countryside photo shoot had twisted into a nightmare, a sinister trap closing around me in the heart of the Black Forest. It all began 3 days ago when an email landed in my inbox from a man named Heinrich Bauer. He claimed to own a picturesque farm deep in the Black Forest and was seeking a photographer to capture the property for a real estate listing. The pay was generous, far more than my usual gigs, and the promise of escaping Berlin's concrete jungle for a few days was too tempting to resist. I jumped at the opportunity, my mind already painting images of rolling fields and rustic charm. The drive was long, the narrow roads winding deeper into the forest, far from the quaint villages and tourist trails. The trees grew denser, their gnarled branches knitting together overhead, blocking out the afternoon sun until the world was bathed in a perpetual twilight. My GPS lost signal about 5 kilometers from the destination, but Heinrich's directions were meticulous, guiding me down unmarked paths lined with moss-covered stones. When I finally arrived, the isolation of the property hit me like a physical force. The farmhouse loomed ahead, a 2-story structure of weathered stone and dark wood, its windows like unblinking eyes. Behind it stood a massive red barn, its paint peeling in long strips to reveal the gray, splintered boards beneath. Fields of tall grass stretched in every direction, swaying gently in the breeze, whispering secrets I couldn't yet hear. Heinrich greeted me at the door, a tall man in his 60s with a face carved by years of hard work, his calloused hands rough as he shook mine. "Willkommen, Fräulein Weber," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I hope you found the place without too much trouble." I smiled back, shouldering my camera bag, the strap digging into my shoulder. "It was quite the adventure, but your directions were perfect. You have a beautiful property." He nodded, a flicker of something, pride perhaps, or sadness, crossing his weathered face. "It's been in my family for generations," he said, his eyes drifting to the fields beyond. "Come, I'll show you to your room. You must be tired after the long drive." The farmhouse's interior was a time capsule, filled with antique furniture that creaked under its own weight and faded photographs lining the walls, their subjects staring out with solemn expressions. My room was on the 2nd floor, small but cozy, with a single window overlooking the barn, its silhouette stark against the fading light. The bed was covered in a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender, and a chipped porcelain wash basin sat on a wooden stand in the corner. "Feel free to start your work whenever you're ready," Heinrich said as he left me to settle in, his heavy boots thudding on the creaky floorboards. He paused at the door, his hand resting on the frame. "Oh, and Fräulein Weber, it's best not to wander too far. The forest can be treacherous for those who don't know it." His words lingered as I unpacked, a faint unease settling in my chest, but I brushed it off. I was here to work, to capture the beauty of this place, not to let my imagination run wild. I spent the rest of the afternoon photographing the farmhouse's exterior, its stone walls glowing in the golden light, and the surrounding landscape where wildflowers dotted the fields like splashes of paint. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I decided to get a few shots of the barn before the light vanished completely. The barn's massive doors creaked as I pushed them open, the sound echoing in the still air. The interior was cavernous, a maze of shadows filled with rusted farm equipment and towering stacks of hay bales. Dust motes danced in the fading sunlight that streamed through the high narrow windows, casting long golden beams across the dirt floor. It was a photographer's dream, every corner rich with texture and contrast, the rough wood, the glint of old metal, the soft edges of hay. I lost myself in the work, my camera clicking as I moved through the space, capturing every angle, every play of light and shadow. Time slipped away, the world outside fading until I noticed the complete darkness pressing against the windows. I checked my watch, 9:47 p.m. My stomach twisted. Heinrich should have been back hours ago. He'd said he'd return by nightfall. I packed up my gear, the clink of lenses and the rustle of my bag loud in the silence. As I slung the strap over my shoulder, a noise from the hayloft above made me freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, creaked across the wooden floor. My heart leapt into my throat. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing in the empty space, sharp and unsteady. "Herr Bauer, is that you?" No response, just more creaking as if someone was pacing above, their steps too heavy, too purposeful to belong to an animal. I told myself it was a raccoon, a barn owl, anything harmless, but the weight of those footsteps pressed against my logic. I moved toward the door, my steps light, my breath shallow, trying to keep the panic at bay. Just as I reached for the handle, a loud thud reverberated from directly above, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Fear paralyzed me, rooting my feet to the ground, every instinct screaming to run. But curiosity, that damn professional curiosity that had landed me in trouble before, held me in place. I found myself walking toward the ladder leading to the hayloft, my hand slipping into my pocket to grip the small canister of pepper spray I always carried. "Is someone up there?" I called again, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I'm coming up, okay?" The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. Slowly, I climbed a ladder, each creak of the old wood setting my nerves further on edge. The hayloft was pitch black, the air thick with the scent of dust and dried straw. I fumbled for my phone, turning on a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness to reveal piles of hay, old crates, and cobwebs clinging to the rafters. My eyes caught on something across the loft, a heavy wooden door I hadn't noticed from below, its surface scarred with deep scratch marks around a rusted padlock. The marks looked fresh, as if someone had clawed at the wood in desperation, trying to get in or out. A chill ran down my spine, the beam trembling in my hand. What the hell was behind that door? And who had been up here just moments ago? I was so focused on the door that I almost missed the creak of the ladder behind me. I whirled around, my light catching a glimpse of a dark figure before it ducked out of sight. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice shaking, the pepper spray now in my hand, its weight a small comfort. "Show yourself." Silence. Then from downstairs, the barn door slammed shut with a resounding bang, followed by the sound of footsteps moving quickly across the dirt floor below. Panic seized me, a cold wave that propelled me toward the ladder. I scrambled down, nearly slipping in my haste, my boots hitting the ground with a thud. But as I reached the barn's main floor, I realized my mistake. I'd left my phone in the loft, its light still burning above. The barn was pitch black, the darkness swallowing me whole. I stood frozen, straining my ears, the silence oppressive, broken only by my own ragged breathing. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, came the sharp scratch of a match being struck. A small flame flickered to life, casting a dim glow that illuminated a face, definitely not Heinrich Bauer's. The man was younger, his cheeks hollow, his eyes wild and gleaming with a manic intensity. He grinned, revealing stained, broken teeth, the shadows twisting his face into something grotesque. Well, he said, his voice raspy, like sandpaper on wood. "What do we have here?" A little bird, far from her nest. I backed away, my hands fumbling for the pepper spray, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "Stay back," I warned, my voice trembling but firm. "I don't want any trouble." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed in the empty barn, chilling me to the bone. "Trouble? Oh, sweetheart, you're already in it." He took a step forward, the match casting twisted shadows across his face, his eyes glinting with malice. "You really shouldn't go poking around in other people's business. Especially not out here, where no one can hear you scream." My back hit something solid, a support beam, its rough wood pressing against my spine. I was cornered, the man advancing slowly, savoring my fear. In desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I raised my camera, still dangling around my neck, and fired off the flash. The burst of light was blinding in the darkness, a white-hot explosion that seared the air. The man cursed, stumbling backward, the match falling from his hand and winking out as it hit the ground. I didn't hesitate. I ran, my hands outstretched in the darkness, groping for the door. My fingers found the handle, and I yanked it open, bursting into the cool night air, the full moon casting a pale, eerie glow over the landscape. The path to the farmhouse was barely visible, but I sprinted toward it, my lungs burning, expecting at any moment to feel hands grabbing me from behind. When I reached the house, I threw myself against the door, slamming it shut and fumbling with the lock, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the bolt. "Herb Bauer," I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty house, raw with panic. "Herb Bauer, where are you?" No answer. I ran from room to room, flicking on lights, the harsh glow revealing nothing but silence. The house was deserted, its stillness mocking me. In the kitchen, I found a note on the table, scrawled in a hurried hand. Asterisk Fräulein Weber. I've been delayed in town. Make yourself at home. I'll return in the morning. HB asterisk. My hand shook as I read the words, the paper crinkling under my grip. What the hell was going on? Who was that man in the barn? And what was behind that locked door in the hayloft? I grabbed the landline phone, intending to call the police, but the line was dead, the receiver silent in my hand. My cell phone was still in the barn, along with my car keys. I was trapped, alone in a house that suddenly felt like a cage. A floorboard creaked upstairs, sharp and deliberate. I froze, my breath catching, my eyes darting to the staircase. Slowly, I turned, my heart hammering as a figure appeared at the top, barely visible in the shadows. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling, the words barely audible. The figure moved, taking one step down the stairs, then another, their silhouette growing clearer in the dim light. It was Heinrich Bauer, but his face was different, colder, crueler, his eyes gleaming with something predatory. "Oh, Fräulein Weber," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, a twisted smile curling his lips. "You should have listened to me. I told you not to wander." I backed away, my mind racing, the kitchen's linoleum cold under my feet. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice shaking but defiant. He smiled, and in that moment, he looked eerily like the man from the barn, their grin sharing the same malevolent edge. "Want, my dear? It's not about what I want. It's about what the forest wants. What it needs." He reached the bottom of the stairs, his boots heavy on the floor, each step deliberate. "You see, the Black Forest has an appetite, and it's our job to feed it." As he advanced, the horrifying truth crashed over me like a wave. The photo shoot, the isolated location, the generous pay. It had all been bait, a carefully laid trap, and I had walked right into it, hook, line, and sinker. My eyes darted around, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything to break free. But Heinrich kept coming, his presence suffocating, his eyes gleaming with a hunger that wasn't human. Now, he cooed, his voice soft but laced with menace. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The others always struggle at first, but in the end, they all feed the forest. Just like you will." Survival instincts surged through me, raw and fierce. I grabbed a heavy candlestick from a nearby table, its brass cold and solid in my hand, and swung it with all my strength. It connected with Heinrich's temple with a sickening crack, the sound reverberating through the room. He crumpled to the floor, his body limp, blood trickling from the wound. I didn't wait to see if he'd get up. I ran, yanking open the front door and plunging into the night, the full moon's light casting long, distorted shadows across the fields. I sprinted toward the road, my lungs burning, the grass whipping at my legs. Behind me, I heard shouting, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, searching for me. I veered off the path and into the forest, branches clawing at my face, tearing at my clothes as I ran blindly through the underbrush. Time lost all meaning, minutes or hours blending into a haze of terror. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rustle of leaves a pursuer closing in. When I finally broke through the tree line onto a paved road, relief flooded me, so intense I nearly collapsed. I flagged down the first car I saw, my appearance, torn clothes, wild eyes, blood-streaked face, startling the elderly couple inside. They were alarmed but kind, driving me straight to the nearest police station without hesitation. I poured out my story, watching the officers' faces shift from skepticism to concern to grim determination as I recounted the barn, the man, Heinrich's chilling words. The police found the farm, of course, but Heinrich Bauer was gone, vanished without a trace, along with any evidence of what had happened. The barn was empty, the mysterious door in the hayloft gone, as if it had never existed, the scratch marks erased. To this day, I don't know the full truth of what happened on that isolated farm in the Black Forest. But sometimes, in my nightmares, I still hear those footsteps in the darkness, still see Heinrich Bauer's cruel smile as he speaks of feeding the forest. And I wonder, with a chill that never quite leaves me, how many others have disappeared into those dark woods, their screams swallowed by the trees, never to be seen again. The first time I noticed something amiss in my apartment, I brushed it off as a lapse in memory, a fleeting moment of forgetfulness in the chaos of my daily grind. The second time, a flicker of doubt crept in, whispering that I might be losing my grip on reality. By the third time, a chilling certainty took hold, sinking its claws into my mind. Someone was invading my space, toying with me in a way so insidious it unraveled the fabric of my sanity. My name is Wolfie, and I'm being haunted by an intruder I can't catch, a phantom who leaves no trace but turns my home into a maze of dread. It started innocently enough, a small disruption in the rhythm of my routine. I'd come home from a grueling day at the office, my tie loosened, my shoulders heavy with the weight of deadlines and meetings. I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter, the familiar clink of metal on granite grounding me as I headed straight for the shower, the hot water washing away the day's stress. Later, as I chopped vegetables for dinner, the knife's rhythmic thud against the cutting board a quiet comfort, I realized my keys weren't where I'd left them. I froze, frowning, my eyes scanning the counter's empty surface. I found them on the coffee table in the living room, neatly arranged next to the TV remote, as if placed with deliberate care. I muttered, my brow furrowing as I picked them up, the metal cool against my palm. Could have sworn I put these on the counter. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to exhaustion, my memory blurred by long hours and too little sleep. But over the next few days, the incidents multiplied, each one a subtle jab at my sense of normalcy. A book I'd been reading, left open on my nightstand, appeared on the bookshelf in the living room, its pages undisturbed but its placement wrong. A mug I'd used for morning coffee, left unwashed in the sink, turned up clean and dry in the cupboard, gleaming under the kitchen light. My shoes, always lined up haphazardly by the door, were suddenly arranged in a precise row, their laces tucked neatly inside. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was sleepwalking, my body moving through the apartment while my mind slept. Maybe the stress of my job, endless spreadsheets, and client demands was causing momentary lapses, small fractures in my awareness. But as the occurrences grew more frequent, more deliberate, a creeping unease took root, coiling in my gut like a snake. I decided to take action to reclaim control. I installed a security camera in my living room, a small device hidden in the leaves of a potted plant, its lens trained on the space where most of the disturbances seemed to occur. The next morning, I woke with a surge of anticipation, certain I'd catch whatever or whoever was behind this. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, my coffee growing cold as I watched. But the video showed nothing out of the ordinary. Just my apartment, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights filtering through the blinds. Everything exactly as I'd left it when I went to bed. No movement, no intruder, no explanation. And yet, when I walked into the living room, my breath caught in my throat. The furniture had been subtly rearranged. The couch was angled slightly toward the window, a shift so small it was almost imperceptible. The coffee table sat a few inches to the left of its usual spot, its magazines fanned out in a new pattern. My hands shook as I rewound the footage, watching it again and again, my eyes burning with frustration. Nothing. No sign of anyone. No evidence of movement. It was as if reality itself had shifted between the camera's unblinking eye and my own perception. The fear took hold then, sharp and unrelenting. I called my best friend, Elfwin, my voice tight with barely controlled panic as I gripped the phone. "When? I need you to come over." "No, please." She must have heard the raw edge of my tone, the desperation that trembled beneath my words, because she didn't ask questions. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said, her voice steady, a lifeline in the storm. True to her word, Elfwin arrived quickly, her knock sharp against the door. As I let her in, her eyes widened at my disheveled appearance, my uncombed hair, my rumpled clothes, the dark circles etched beneath my eyes. "Wolf, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with concern. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the living room, the hardwood floor cool under my bare feet. "I think I'm going crazy, Win," I said, my voice cracking. "Or someone's gaslighting me. I don't know which is worse." Elfwin gently guided me to the couch, her hand warm on my arm, her brow furrowed with worry. "Slow down," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Start from the beginning." So I told her everything, the moved keys, the rearranged books, the inexplicably clean mug, the shoes aligned with eerie precision. I described the security footage, how it showed nothing while my apartment transformed around me. As I spoke, I watched the skepticism in her eyes give way to genuine worry, her fingers tightening around the edge of the couch. "Have you called the police?" she asked when I finished, her voice low, as if afraid to break the fragile silence. I laughed, the sound bitter, echoing off the bare walls. "And tell them what? That my keys keep moving around. That my couch is half an inch out of place. They think I was nuts." Elfwin was quiet for a moment, chewing her lower lip, her eyes distant as she processed my words. "Okay," she said finally, her voice resolute. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm staying over tonight. We'll set up more cameras, cover every inch of this place. If someone's breaking in, we'll catch them." I nodded, a wave of relief washing over me, grounding me in her presence. Having Elfwin here, having a plan, pushed back the encroaching paranoia, if only for a moment. We spent the afternoon rigging the apartment with cameras, one in the kitchen, one in the bedroom, another in the hallway, checking locks, securing windows. We even placed strips of tape along the edges of doors and windows, a crude but effective way to detect any entry. By nightfall, my apartment was a fortress of surveillance, every corner watched, every access point monitored. As we settled in for the night, Elfwin on the couch, me in my bedroom, I felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile belief that we'd get to the bottom of this. Whatever was happening, we'd find the truth. I woke to Elfwin's scream, a piercing sound that cut through the haze of sleep and sent me bolting out of bed, my heart pounding like a drum. I raced to the living room, the floor cold against my feet, my breath ragged. Elfwin stood in the center of the room, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with terror. What's wrong? What happened?" I demanded, my voice sharp with fear. She turned to me, her face drained of color, her hands shaking as she pointed. "Wolf, I woke up on the floor. The couch." Her voice broke, and I followed her gaze, my blood running cold. The couch was gone. In its place stood my kitchen table, its chairs neatly tucked around it, as if it had always belonged there. The living room rug was pristine, no indentations to suggest the couch had ever been moved. "No," I whispered, stumbling backward, my shoulder brushing against the wall. No, this isn't possible." The room spun, reality tilting beneath me, a nightmare made tangible. Elfwin grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, her voice urgent. "We have to get out of here. Now." We fled the apartment, not stopping for shoes or phones, our bare feet slapping against the hallway's tiled floor. As we burst onto the street, the cool morning air hit my face, sharp and grounding, the city waking around us with a hum of early traffic. I bent over, hands on my knees, gasping for breath, my mind racing. "The cameras," I said, my voice hoarse. "We need to check the footage." Elfwin nodded, still visibly shaken. Okay, let's go to my place. We can access the cloud storage from there." The walk to Elfwin's apartment was tense, both of us jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound. A car horn, a pigeon flapping its wings. Her place was a small, cluttered loft, the air thick with the scent of incense and coffee. We huddled around her laptop, pulling up the surveillance feeds, our hands trembling as we navigated the interface. Hours of footage unfolded before us, each frame a mockery of our fear. Empty rooms, unchanging, silent. The kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, all still, as if frozen in time. No intruders, no movement, just the quiet hum of an empty apartment. I watched, my heart sinking, as Elfwin rewound and replayed the video for the dozenth time, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I don't understand," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "How is this possible?" I slumped back in my chair, a hollow ache spreading through my chest, my hands cold against the table's surface. "It's not," I said, meeting her gaze, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. "Unless," I hesitated, the words heavy on my tongue, "unless we're dealing with something beyond our understanding. Something that can manipulate reality itself." Elfwin shook her head, her movements sharp, almost frantic. "No, Wolf, that's crazy talk. There has to be a logical explanation." But I could see the doubt in her eyes, the creeping realization that what we were experiencing defied logic, defied reason. Over the next few days, we tried everything. More cameras, their lenses glinting like unblinking eyes. Motion sensors, beeping faintly in the quiet. We even hired a private investigator, a grizzled man with a skeptical frown who combed through my apartment for signs of tampering. But the results were always the same. Objects moved, furniture rearranged, all without a trace of how or why. I stopped sleeping, surviving on black coffee and raw nerves. My reflection in the mirror as strangers, gaunt, hollow and haunted. Elfwin stayed with me, her own fear growing with each inexplicable incident, her laughter replaced by a tense silence. We began to doubt our own senses, our own memories, the line between reality and delusion blurring with every passing day. A week after that first night at Elfwin's, I hit my breaking point. I woke to find every piece of furniture in my bedroom balanced precariously on top of my bed, an impossible feat, a grotesque sculpture of chairs, nightstands, and lamps defying gravity. The sight broke something in me, a snap like a taut wire giving way. I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox, its handle cold and heavy, and began smashing holes in the walls, the drywall crumbling under my blows. I tore up floorboards, splinters biting into my hands, my breath ragged as I searched for hidden cameras, secret passages, anything to explain the madness. I was a man possessed, my apartment becoming a battlefield, debris scattering across the floor. Elfwin found me like that, kneeling amidst the destruction, sobbing uncontrollably, the hammer slipping from my bloodied hands. "Wolf," she said softly, kneeling beside me, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "This has to stop. We need help." I looked up at her, my vision blurred with tears, my throat raw. Who can help us, Win? Who would even believe us? My voice was a broken thing, barely audible over the pounding in my ears. She took a deep breath, squeezing my hand, her grip firm despite her own trembling. "I've been doing some research," she said, her words careful, measured. "There's a specialist, someone who deals with unexplainable phenomena. I think we should talk to her." Under normal circumstances, I would have scoffed, dismissing the idea as nonsense. But nothing about this was normal. I nodded, too exhausted to argue, my body heavy with defeat. The specialist, a stern-faced woman named Edith, met us in a small office lined with books and strange artifacts, her presence commanding despite her unassuming appearance. She listened to our story without interruption, her fingers steepled under her chin, her eyes sharp and assessing. When we finished, she sat back, her expression grave, the weight of her words settling over us like a shroud. "What you're experiencing," she said carefully, her voice steady, "is not unprecedented. There are entities, for lack of a better term, that feed on fear and confusion. They manipulate our reality, our perceptions, to create chaos and terror." I leaned forward, a mix of fear and desperate hope surging through me, my hands clenching the arms of the chair. "How do we stop it?" I asked, my voice raw, pleading. Edith's expression didn't soften, her gaze unwavering. "It won't be easy," she said. "These entities are powerful, and they don't give up their victims willingly. But there are ways to fight back, to reclaim your space and your sanity." She outlined a plan, a strange blend of ancient rituals and modern technology designed to cleanse my apartment and repel the entity. It sounded far-fetched, even ridiculous. Chants in forgotten languages, symbols drawn in salt and chalk, devices to disrupt unseen energies. But I was out of options, my life a crumbling ruin. That night, Elfwin and I returned to my apartment, armed with Edith's instructions and a desperate determination, our footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. As we began the ritual, chanting words in a language I didn't understand, the air grew heavy, charged with a malevolent attention that pressed against us. Objects began to move on their own, flying across the room with impossible speed, books, mugs, a lamp, crashing against the walls. The walls themselves seemed to ripple and warp, reality bending around us, a living nightmare. I gripped Elfwin's hand, her fingers cold and trembling, and forced myself to continue the chant, my voice shaking as terror threatened to swallow me whole. And then, suddenly, it was over. The apartment fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere dissipating like mist in sunlight. The air felt lighter, the shadows less menacing. We stood there, shaken but alive, in a room that finally felt like my own again, the chaos stilled. In the days that followed, there were no more unexplained movements, no more reality-defying rearrangements. The apartment was mine once more, its corners familiar, its silence comforting. But the experience left its mark, a scar on both Elfwin and me. We had glimpsed something beyond our understanding, faced a terror that defied explanation, and survived. As I sit here now, writing this down, my pen scratching against the paper, I still struggle to make sense of what happened. Was it truly some otherworldly entity, a malevolent force feeding on my fear? Or was it an elaborate hoax, a shared illusion born of stress and paranoia? I may never know for certain, the truth slipping through my fingers like smoke. But one thing I do know, I'll never again take for granted the simple comfort of knowing that when I put something down, it will stay where I left it. Because now I understand, with a clarity that chills me to the bone, just how fragile our perception of reality is, and how easily it can be shattered by forces we cannot see. I woke to the unmistakable sound of something clinking near my bed, a metallic rustling, like glass bottles being jostled in the quiet of the night. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was dreaming, caught in that liminal space where every noise is amplified, every shadow a creeping threat. But then my eyes snapped open, and I saw her, a woman crouched in front of the minibar, her back to me, rummaging through the tiny bottles and snack packets with quick, deliberate movements. The dim glow of a streetlight seeping through the curtains cast her in silhouette, her outline sharp against the room's muted darkness. What the hell? The words burst out, sharper than I intended, my voice rough with sleep and spiked with adrenaline. I sat up, the sheets pooling around my waist, my heart kicking into a frantic rhythm. The woman froze, her hand hovering over the open minibar door, her body tensing like a coiled spring. Slowly, she turned her head just enough for me to catch the edge of her profile. Thin face, dark hair pulled back tightly into a severe bun. She wore a plain gray uniform, the kind hotel maids don, but something felt off, a subtle wrongness I couldn't pinpoint. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she said quickly, her voice soft, almost rehearsed, carrying a practiced calm. "I didn't mean to wake you. I was just checking the minibar inventory." Her eyes avoided mine, darting to the floor, and her movements were stiff, as if she were poised to flee. I frowned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, my mind struggling to catch up. "Is that a thing hotels do now?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism, the fog of sleep still clouding my thoughts. At 2 a.m, she stood, shutting the minibar door with a soft thud that seemed louder in the stillness. "We do routine checks sometimes to make sure everything's stocked properly," she said, her tone even, but there was a tightness to it, a thread of unease beneath the surface. She grabbed a small inventory notepad from the desk, her fingers clutching it like a shield, and moved toward the door, her steps quick and practiced. "Hold on," I said, swinging my legs out of bed and grabbing the robe draped over the chair, the fabric cool against my skin. "I don't even remember seeing you when I checked in." My voice was steadier now, suspicion sharpening my senses as I studied her, the overhead light casting harsh shadows across her face. Her hand paused on the door handle, her shoulders stiffening. "I worked the night shift," she said, offering a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, a practiced gesture that felt hollow. "I don't usually check guests in. I'll let the front desk know about the inconvenience." Before I could respond, she slipped out, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving the room colder, as if her presence had drained the warmth from the air. I stood there for a moment, my pulse still racing, trying to process the encounter. The minibar door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light glinting off the glass bottles inside. I crossed the room, my bare feet silent on the carpet, and peeked inside. Everything seemed untouched, the vodka, the soda cans, the overpriced chocolate bars, all lined up in their usual order. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been looking for something, or hiding something, her hands moving with a purpose that didn't match her explanation. I picked up my phone from the nightstand, its screen glowing 2:17 a.m., the stark numbers anchoring me in the surreal moment. No missed calls, no messages, just the quiet hum of the hotel around me. The rest of the night was restless, my mind replaying the conversation in a loop. Her voice, too smooth, like she'd memorized the lines. Her eyes, darting around the room, checking for exits. And why would anyone check the minibar at that hour? It made no sense, a puzzle with missing pieces. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows stretching across the room like fingers, my thoughts spiraling until exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I headed to the lobby, my curiosity gnawing at me, a persistent itch I couldn't ignore. The space was quiet. The only sound the faint were of a coffee machine in the corner, its aroma mingling with the sterile scent of cleaning products. A woman with neat blonde hair and a polite smile, Claire, according to her name tag, greeted me from behind the front desk. "Good morning," she said, her voice bright but professional. "I hope you had a pleasant night's sleep." I forced a smile, my hands tucked into my pockets to hide their restlessness. "Actually, I had kind of a weird experience," I said, leaning against the counter. "A maid came into my room around 2 in the morning, said she was checking the mini bar." Claire's brow furrowed, her smile faltering just enough to betray her unease. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "Do you remember what she looked like?" "Dark hair, pulled back, maybe in her 30s, I said, picturing the woman's tense silhouette. "She was wearing a gray uniform, had one of those little notepads." Claire typed something, her eyes scanning the screen, her expression growing more guarded. "We don't have any night maids on duty at that hour," she said, her voice careful, measured. "Our cleaning staff finishes their shift by 8 p.m. I blinked, a chill running down my spine, cold and sharp. "But she was definitely wearing the uniform," I said, my voice rising slightly, frustration creeping in. "She said it was policy, that she was checking inventory." Claire's eyes met mine, her expression now serious, the polite facade slipping. "I'm really sorry about that, ma'am. I'll have to report this to our manager." "Are you sure she was in uniform?" "Positive," I said, crossing my arms, the unease coiling tighter in my chest. "Is it possible she just got the time wrong?" She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "That doesn't seem likely," she said, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "But I'll make sure we check the security footage. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." I nodded, but as I turned to walk away, something about the exchange gnawed at me, a subtle discord that lingered. If she wasn't supposed to be there, then who was she? And what had she been doing in my room, crouched in the dark like a thief? The question followed me through the day, a shadow trailing my steps. Later that evening, after my conference sessions wrapped up, I found myself lingering in a hotel bar, its dim lighting and low hum of conversation a welcome distraction. The place was intimate, with dark wood tables and leather stools, the kind of atmosphere that invited anonymity. Guests hunched over their drinks, absorbed in quiet conversations or scrolling through their phones, the clink of glasses a soft counterpoint to the jazz playing faintly in the background. I ordered a glass of red wine, its tartness grounding me, as I tried to shake the tension that had clung to me since the night before. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked up to see a man about my age, dressed in business casual, his tie loosened, his smile easy but genuine. He had a friendly face, with laugh lines crinkling around his eyes, suggesting a warmth I found myself drawn to. "Sure," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me, the wine glass cool against my fingers. "Long day." "Something like that," he said, settling in with a scotch, the amber liquid catching the light. "Sales and marketing. Thrilling stuff." He laughed, a genuine sound that eased the knot in my chest. "Name's Mark." "Emma," I replied, offering a small smile. "Nice to meet you." We chatted for a bit, the conversation flowing easily. Work, travel, the usual small talk of strangers in a transient place. It was a welcome distraction, his easy demeanor pulling me out of the spiral of unease. But as the bar began to clear out, the crowd thinning to a few stragglers, the topic drifted to the hotel itself. "You been here before?" Mark asked, swirling his drink, the ice clinking softly. "First time," I said, shrugging, my fingers tracing the stem of my glass. "It's fine, I guess. Though something weird happened last night." His eyebrow lifted, his casual demeanor faltering slightly. "Weird how?" I hesitated, debating whether to share, but his attentive gaze felt safe, an invitation to unburden. "A maid came into my room in the middle of the night," I said, my voice low, as if the walls might be listening. "Said she was checking the mini bar." It was off. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face, his fingers pausing on his glass. "You serious?" he asked, leaning in, his voice dropping to match mine. That's not right. Yeah, I said, the memory sharpening my words. And when I asked the front desk about it, they said there aren't any maids on duty that late. He glanced around the bar, his eyes scanning the room before returning to me. I shouldn't say this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but a guy I met during lunch mentioned something similar. Said he caught someone going through his stuff when he was out, but when he complained, the hotel just brushed it off. My stomach tightened, the wine suddenly sour on my tongue. Did he say what she looked like? I asked, my voice tense, my hands gripping the edge of the table. No, just that she was wearing a uniform, Mark said, sighing as he leaned back, his posture loosening slightly. Look, I don't want to freak you out, but maybe you should keep your door locked. Just in case. I nodded, my throat dry, the bar's warmth no longer comforting. Yeah, I will, I said, the words feeling inadequate against the growing dread. That night, I double-checked the lock on my room's door, the bolt sliding into place with a reassuring click. I wedged a chair under the handle for good measure, its wooden legs scraping against the carpet, a makeshift barrier against the unknown. The room felt too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every sound, the creak of the bed, the hum of the air conditioner, my own shallow breaths. I lay there, staring at the dark outline of the mini-bar, its silhouette a silent accusation, the shadows stretching across the floor like grasping hands. Just as I began to drift off, my body heavy with exhaustion, I heard it, the faint click of the door handle being tested, a soft, deliberate sound that sent my heart into overdrive. I sat up, my body rigid, my pulse pounding in my ears, every muscle tensed. The door didn't open, but I heard the faintest scrape, as if someone were probing the lock, checking its resistance. I clutched my phone, its screen casting a harsh blue glow. My fingers trembling as I waited, the silence thickening around me. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity, my breath shallow and fast. And then so quiet I almost missed it. A whisper slipped through the door, soft and chilling. Emma, my name, spoken with a familiarity that turned my blood to ice. My hand tightened around the phone, my knuckles white. Who's there? I whispered back, my voice barely audible, swallowed by the room's oppressive quiet. Nothing. No response, just the weight of that silence pressing down on me. I crept closer to the door, the carpet cold against my socks, my ear pressed to the wood, straining for any sound, a breath, a shuffle, anything to confirm I hadn't imagined it. The hallway was silent, the hotel's hum distant and impersonal. My fingers hovered over the latch, every instinct screaming not to open it, to stay safe behind the locked door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, my body frozen in that moment of terror. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat by the door, my back against the wall, my eyes fixed on the handle, waiting for another sound, another whisper. The tension coiled tighter with every passing hour, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. At dawn, when the first light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in soft grays, I finally exhaled, my body aching from the vigil. I went straight to the front desk, my steps heavy, my eyes burning with fatigue. Claire was there, her expression composed, but her eyes flickered with recognition when she saw me, a subtle tightening that betrayed her calm. "Miss Emma, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice polite but guarded, her hands folded on the counter. I told her everything, the noise, the whisper, the door handle's faint movement. My words tumbled out, urgent and raw, my hands gesturing as I tried to convey the fear that still clung to me. She listened, nodding, her face a mask of professionalism, but when I finished, she offered only that same polite smile, as if I complained about a noisy neighbor. "We'll make sure the night staff is aware of your concerns," she said, her fingers tapping the keyboard. I apologized for the inconvenience. I stared at her, waiting for more, a promise to investigate, a hint of genuine concern, but she just typed, her eyes fixed on the screen, dismissing me with practiced ease. Frustration welled up, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it, too exhausted to push further. As I walked away, I glanced back, catching Claire whispering to another staff member, their heads bent together. For a moment, I thought I saw her glance in my direction, her eyes cold and calculating, a look that sent a shiver down my spine. In that moment, I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my chest, that whatever was happening here, I wouldn't get any answers. The hotel, with its sterile corridors and practiced smiles, was hiding something, Something that had crept into my room in the dead of night, spoken my name, and left me with a fear I couldn't shake. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft ding, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching me, a presence that lingered long after I left the hotel behind.